Good evening. We have a quorum. Thank you all very much for coming. Everyone, please take your seats. Thank you for coming tonight and supplying a quorum. I've inspected the return of service of the warrant and determined that it has been properly served. I will assume the consent of the meeting to waive the reading of the warrant. Any objections? Hearing no objection, the reading of the warrant is hereby waived. Now on to the really important stuff. The fire exits are to your left at the front and rear of the auditorium. If we need to evacuate the room, then I will adjourn the meeting until tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. in this same location. In the cafeteria, for those who are there, the fire exits are also in the right and left-hand corners. So everyone, it's that time of the night. Pull out your device, especially if you have it buried in a handbag and get embarrassed when it starts ringing. And please silence your devices. At this time, I would like to ask each person on stage to introduce him or herself, and we'll start with our new town clerk.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary D. Alderetti, your town clerk.
Hello, I'm Nathan Brown, Chair of the Board of Selectmen.
It's your turn, Kate.
Kate Reed, Vice Chair.
Luke Oscalillo, Board of Selectmen.
Hello, Gary Kissinger, Board of Selectmen.
Alan Lewis, Board of Selectmen.
Tom Harrington, Town Council. Tim Goddard, Town Administrator.
James Cataccio, Finance Committee.
Melissa McMorrow, Finance Committee.
Scott Triola, Finance Committee.
Victor Liang, Finance Committee Chair.
Tom Smith, Finance Committee.
Lynn Lipinski, Finance Committee.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to recognize Nathan Brown, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, for a few remarks.
Good evening, everybody. Every year at this time, we speak in appreciation for those people who have served on committees or retired or left employment of the town. And I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here.
It's directional.
So this year we've had some very long-term employees leave. First is David Flannery, who is our fire chief. David, I was lucky to be liaison to public safety for the last 4 years and worked a lot with David on fire department issues. And I think in that amount of time, he may have put about 1/10 of 1%, maybe 1/100th of 1% of knowledge of fire departments into my head, and it was overflowing. Just an incredibly vast amount of knowledge. He has been working for the town for 50 years, a combined service for the fire department and the Carlisle Public Schools. 15 years as the fire chief, 24 years as the deputy chief, 9 as a firefighter, and also working at the public schools. And he retired on December 31st of last year. So want to thank him for all of his service. Also, another longtime employee at the fire department retired in 2019, actually I think in 2018 a little bit. Jonathan White was our deputy fire chief. He was 15 years as the deputy chief and 15 years as a captain. So he was with our fire department for 30 years. And want to thank him for all of his, lending all of his experience and help to the town of Carlisle. And then So we had to find a new fire chief, and in the interim, we needed somebody to carry the baton, and obviously carrying the baton of very large shoes to fill, and luckily we had somebody who was able to do that right at the ready. And so I really want to thank Bert Rubenstein for not only helping us go through the selection process, but for leading the fire department during the period of time when we did not have a fire chief. Thank you very much, Bert. I want to acknowledge Charlene Hinton, who was our town clerk, who I don't know how many years she was town clerk. I think it was 15 years. 15 years as town clerk, and she stopped being town clerk last summer. Thank you, Charlene. Other people who have left, James Marchand was on the Board of Assessors for 20 years. Cynthia Schweppe was on the Board of Registrars for 14 years. Steve Golson, Library Trustee for 8 years. Steve Hinton was on the Municipal Facilities for 2 years. Josh Kablotsky, School Committee for 9 years, and the Municipal Facilities Committee for 2 years. Mary Storrs on the School Committee for 9 years. Carrie Colburn Dion was our finance treasurer, finance director and treasurer and collector. She was with us for 2.5 years. Todd Brady, Board of Health, 3 years. Caroline Guild, Lyme Disease Subcommittee for 2 years. We're getting there. Tom Smith, Finance Committee for 3 years. Steve Carlin on the Agricultural Commission for 5 years. They're making me do the math now. Stephen Smith, Conservation Commission, Cranberry Bog Working Group, and the Deer Committee for 2 years. Lynn Carroll, Land Stewardship Committee for 2 years. Bill Risso, I'm not sure there's a committee he hasn't been on. But he was on the Carlisle Energy Task Force for 10 years. And lastly, Sabrina Perry was the founder of Center Park, transitioning it from just a lot into the park that it is today. She worked on that tirelessly for 14 years. Thank you very much, Sabrina.
Thank you very much. Before I get into the nitty-gritty discussion of procedures, I'd like to share with you a poem that one of your fellow citizens recently passed along to me. Actually, in other towns, they do all sorts of exciting things at the beginning of town meeting. So I thought this was a good idea. It's from the collection Truth About Small Towns by a fellow named David Baker. It's entitled Council Meeting. And while it's not exactly a town meeting, I think you might be able to see some parallels. The latest uproar to allow Wendy's to build another fast food burger shack on 2 acres of wetlands near Raccoon Creek, or to permit the conservationist, well-to-do citizenry to keep their green space and thus assure long, unsullied views from their redwood decks, picture windows, and backyards chemically rich as golf greens. The paper's rife with spats, accusations, pieties both ways. Wendy's promises flowers, jobs. The citizens want this too, but want it 5 miles away, where people don't care about egrets, willows, good views. Oh, it's going to be a long night. Call out for pizza, somebody brew some tea, then we'll all stand up for what we believe. Okay, with that, what do I get? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Okay, you want more poetry? Okay. We'll see. If you don't like it, you can vote me out next year if someone would please run against me. Okay, on to procedures. I'm not going to go through the whole long list, but there are a couple things I need to highlight, and there are a few things differently that to be done differently this year. First, let me welcome anyone who's a newcomer, new to Carlisle, and especially if you are new to this strange New England tradition called town meeting. I hope that most of you have brought your green town warrant book. There are a couple more out front if you need them, though it's actually not too critical at this point. You can see a summary of town meeting procedures starting at page 49 and a glossary of helpful terms to know at page 52. If you're even more of a parliamentary procedure geek than what we put in this book, there is additional information on the town meeting webpage at the town website, carlislemass.gov, using your silenced electronic device. In addition to the warrant books, I hope that each of you have this motion handout that they were available at the front table. The warrant is intended to warn the citizens of what we expect to be voting on, but it's the motions that are the actual votes that will be taken tonight. And in a couple of instances, you'll see that the text of the motions is a little bit different than what was published in the warrant, so that's why it's important that you have the motions book. I'll be sure to let you know those instances where we have some changes. Also, to those people who will be making the motions, you are free to read the entire motion if it's 2 or 3 sentences. If it's longer than that, you're free also to say, I move Article so-and-so as printed in the motions handout. A note on the order of the articles. After some discussion with the planning board, town council, and the selectmen, we're going to change the order of the marijuana articles. So just flipping the order between 18 and 19, so we will go from 17 to 19 to 18. So for those who are keeping track, the partial ban will be considered before the full ban. Okay. Next, speaking. We have, as usual, we have the microphones in the aisles and one, do we have one in back this year? Yes or no? We did not put, okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, only 5. Oh, so 3 is in back, but not in the middle of back, okay. Very good. If you can, please move to the microphones in advance of requesting to speak, but if not, I can always recognize you from the floor. When I do recognize you, please state your name and address, and please do repeat it even if you've spoken previously. The meeting is taped and also being live streamed. Actually, I'm not sure whether we're live streamed tonight, but it is being taped for CCTV, so each time you speak, you must identify yourself. Our time limits for speakers are 8 minutes for the main presentation. We'll have a couple of exceptions tonight, and I'll call those out, and 3 minutes for comments from the floor. Kindly do address your comments to me rather than to anyone else who's spoken. I expect that here in Carlisle, we will, as we have traditionally done, adhere to the norm of treating all speakers with dignity and respect by listening attentively and without interruptions. We have some potentially contentious issues on the warrant tonight, and that's okay. It's even a good thing. It's part of democracy. We don't all think alike, nor should we. We can, however, disagree without being disagreeable. Let's discuss each article in an honest, focused, and respectful way. Amendments. So we are adhering to our usual rule, which is that we do need 2 copies in writing if it's anything that is complicated. If it's simple, I'd like to change 1 or 2 words that you can easily explain, and that's okay, it doesn't need to be in writing. But otherwise, we would prefer to have it in writing so that I can have a copy and the town clerk can have a copy. We do have, if you need a sheet of paper, we actually have an amendment form. They are available. There is a music stand on, I guess it's your left hand, this left aisle here behind microphone 4. Across from the trash bin there is a stack of these forms for amendments, and feel free to use those if you need to. And it includes the procedures about amendments on it. Next, the cafeteria. As usual, we have set up the cafeteria to accommodate parents with small children. To help with procedures in that room, I've appointed Vanessa Maroney of 142 Bedford Road to serve as assistant moderator and have sworn her to that position. Vanessa, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. So I assume the audio was working well?
I think so. We have about 8 or 9 people in here.
Okay, wonderful. So we do ask that people in the cafeteria conduct themselves similarly to those in the main room, at least to the extent that you're able to do so with small children in tow. In order to keep things moving efficiently, I would ask that anyone in the cafeteria who wishes to speak to a motion, please come to the back of the auditorium to be recognized. If for some reason you do need to stay in the cafeteria, that's okay. Just let the assistant moderator know you'd like to speak, and she will message me and we'll give you the opportunity. Voting. Most of the votes we'll take tonight will be done by voice, but if I'm in doubt, I'll ask to see a show of cards. Everyone got a card, colored card. What color are we this year? Blue on the way in? Everyone got them? Okay. They're useful, make it a little bit easier for us to get a visual count. When we do go to the counted votes, I'll give you some more instructions about how we're going to do that. Let me thank in advance the tellers who are lined up to help us count votes tonight. Okay, great. Guests. Okay, anyone who is not a registered voter here in Carlisle, we have you sitting down front, the right-hand side. Any other non-voters who happen to be in the room? Anyone? Okay, good. All right. Non-voters are not allowed to address the meeting without prior consent of the meeting. Typically, however, we do hear from non-voters who are employees, volunteers, or advisors to the town. So unless there is objection, I will assume the consent of the meeting to recognize the following people to speak. Non-voter appointed members of any town or regional committees or task forces, non-voter employees of the town of Carlisle, including the Carlisle Public Schools, non-voter management employees of the Concord-Carlisle Regional School District, and town council. All these people will be permitted to speak. However, that permission is limited to topics relevant to their official capacity with the town. Do I have the meeting's consent? Any objection to that? Hearing no objection, it's so ordered. I should also mention that any other non-voters who may be with us tonight who do not fall into one of those categories may only speak upon further motion and consent of the meeting. In other words, you have to have one of the voters move for consent to allow you to speak. Now that we've covered speaking, let's take a moment to talk about listening. If anything interferes with your ability to hear, see, or otherwise participate in the proceedings, you may interrupt the meeting with a point of privilege to ask that we rectify the situation. Now, about ending the meeting. Tonight's warrant is longer than we've had in the past few years. My cloudy crystal ball says it will be a challenge to finish in one night, but I could be wrong, and I would love to be wrong. But here's how we're going to handle things. I'll try to be as efficient as possible and ask everyone's cooperation to being as succinct and non-repetitive in your remarks. By Carlisle tradition, we will not take up any new articles after 10 p.m. However, if we're close to finishing and it's approaching 10, then we'll do a check-in at that point and see if we want to just push through and finish. So if you're here for one of the later articles and you leave and then the meeting decides it wants to keep going, you've been warned that might happen, okay? I don't expect it to, but it'll be up to the voters, all right? That's about it for procedures. I'd now like to recognize Mr. Tim Goddard, our town administrator, to provide the annual report to town meeting on the Patriot Act.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tim Goddard, your town administrator. One of my duties is to report annually to town meeting regarding the Patriot Act. I can say that having consulted with Chief Fisher, that no Carlisle residents have been detained or questioned with respect to the Patriot Act in the last calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are now ready to move to Article 1, which is adoption of the consent agenda. This article is essentially a procedural rule under which we would vote on the following series of articles 2 through 7, or are we on 8? 2 through 8, I'm sorry, in a single package. I now recognize Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that Articles 2 through 8 be considered in one motion, and that the motions for Articles 2 through 8 be hereby adopted as printed in the town meeting motions booklet.
Second. Is there a second? Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. So just to go over the procedures here, if we adopt this article, then I call out each article in turn. If you have a question about one of the items on the consent agenda, or if you object to any particular article being included in the vote, in the package vote, please just say hold in a loud voice when the number is called. If you simply have a question, you'll have the opportunity to ask it. If you want the article removed from the consent agenda, it is removed automatically and we'll vote on it separately. Any questions about that? Okay, in terms of recommendations here, both the Board of Selectmen and FinCom voted unanimously to recommend adoption of Article 1 as well as the main motions under Articles 2 through 8. Did we have any other boards or committees take a position on Article 1 or the other articles here listed? Okay, we did not. So with the consent of town meeting, I will divide the question. So you see this is really in two parts. First, consider whether to adopt the consent agenda as a procedure. And if you vote yes on that, then we'll go through and we'll see if anyone has any objections to or has any holds on Articles 2 through 8. Is there any objection to the chair dividing the question? Okay, seeing none, we will divide the question. But actually, let me ask, any debate on Article 1? Okay, so all those in favor of voting via consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Vanessa, did we have any nays in the?
No.
Okay, so the vote is unanimous and it passes, and I so declare. So now we'll go through the procedure. Article 2 is to accept the town reports. Any hold on that? Okay, Article 3, the salaries of elected officials. No holds on that. Article 4 is to approve $3,000 for the actuarial valuation of post-employment benefits. Article 5 approves a real estate tax exemption under MGL Chapter 59, Section 5C. Any holds on that? Article 6 is the fiscal year 2020 Chapter 90 authorization, which is the revolving funds around road use. Okay, Article 7 sets the authorization for revolving funds for the various town departments. And you see the listed authorization values in your motion booklet. And finally, no holds on that? Okay, and finally, Article 8 sets the appropriation for PEG, which is the Public Educational Government Local Access Television funds. Any hold on that? Okay, seeing no holds, I believe we can go ahead and vote for the full consent agenda. We need this as a two-thirds vote? Did we have any? There were no two-thirds articles in here, so we can do it by majority this time. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And Vanessa, in the cafeteria, any objections?
No.
The motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. So now we are on to Article 9, which is sets the budget transfers for fiscal year 2019. I recognize Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to transfer sums of money into various line items of the fiscal year 2019 operating budget from other line items of said budget, from unexpected funds in various accounts, as printed in the motions handbook.
Okay, and I trust you meant to say unexpended rather than unexpected.
Yes, that is exactly what I intended to say.
Maybe both, though, right?
Yeah. Very good. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. And Mr. Brown, did you want to speak to this, or did you FinCom?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So this article permits the town to transfer funds from line items running a surplus for this fiscal year to other line items currently running in a deficit in order to balance the operating budget for fiscal year 19 year end.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll just proceed directly to a vote. All those in favor of the fiscal year 2019 budget transfers as set forth in the motion handbook, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And Vanessa, results from the cafeteria?
All aye.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. Article 10 is the fiscal year 2020 operating budget. Mr. Liang. And could I ask one of your colleagues from FinCom to get the light switches behind you to the left of the... Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Victor Liang. As I said earlier, I'm the chair of the Carlisle Finance Committee. On behalf of the Finance Committee, I'm here tonight to share with...
Excuse me, you'll have to move the article first.
Oh, move the article first. Okay, I thought that was at the end. Sorry. All right. So the motion is I move that the total of $38,871,918 be appropriated for FY 2020 as set forth in the column entitled FY 2020 Recommended Budget. In the chart accompanying this motion, to meet this appropriation, $53,000 to be transferred from the ambulance fund, that $14,945 be transferred from the stabilization fund, that $32,500 be transferred from the reserve for bond premium account, and that the balance be raised from the FY 20 tax levy and other general revenues of the town.
Okay, and we'll spare ourselves reading every line item. Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Okay, so we'll just incorporate by reference all the line items here without reading them further. Okay, Mr. Liang, I've allocated you 16 minutes. This is one of our exceptions since the budget is such a major item.
Great.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Moderator. As I said before, I'm here to share with you the recommendation from the Finance Committee around the FY 2020 budget for the town of Carlisle. So here's the overall budget summary for FY 2020. There's a total spending plan of $31.5 million. This includes capital and facilities articles as printed in the warrant. This represents a 1.9% increase over last year. Average property tax increase estimated to be about $518, and estimated excess levy capacity of just shy of $1.6 million. The operating budget is balanced at $30,871,918. This is an increase of 3.7%. No override is expected or required. This maintains recommended reserves at 11.1% of the operating budget, and no additional hours of staffing over current levels for town departments is in this budget. So you'll note here, and I'll just make a quick comment, that you see the total spending plan of the increase of 1.9% is different than the operating budget increase of 3.7%. That is really due to the fact that last year we had significant capital articles in addition, in excess of what we have this year. So that kind of offset the increase between the operating budget and the overall total spending plan. So this next slide just highlights, and FinCom starts this process in September of each year. Our role is to advise the town on financial matters. This budget process recommendation is probably the largest piece of work that we do for the town each year. Our goal and responsibility is to present a balanced budget that's fully funded from property taxes, state aid, forecasted local receipts, and transfers from available funds. And we'll talk about this in more detail as we go through the presentation. But as you'll see, that one of the challenges we have here in Carlisle is that in our town, a low level of residential construction and flat local receipts and state aid put some constraints in terms of our revenue coming into the town. In addition to that, our wage adjustments increased health benefit costs, which we know that in our country is quite significant in terms of the year-over-year growth. These drive increases across all the departments that we have in our town. You'll also hear tonight around warrants around maintenance of town buildings, and they continue to require significant investment, as well as addressing our OPEB liability. So all in all, the aspect of constrained revenue on the top and the increasing expenses on the bottom side does put a great deal of challenge in terms of our budget as a town. This is the process we go through each year. If you look there, we start at the beginning of the budget cycle and providing a letter to departments. We make the request to start in the mindset of a 0% increase, excluding wage increases. Then we go and have department meetings with town departments and committees to hear their requests and their needs as departments. And that leads to a budget recommendation or guidance at the end of December. We have coordination meetings with the Board of Selectmen as we kind of go through this process to December, which is actually highlighted here with regards to the issue of the guideline budget in December. From December to March, we actually continue to meet with town departments and committees. And we do that because we know that this process is long, and there are things that change as we kind of go along in the process. So if there's material changes to their needs, they come back and we have another discussion with them as we go and prepare the budget recommendation. And then ultimately we come to the budget recommendation in March, and in April, a week before this meeting, we actually had a public hearing around the budget for FY 2020. So this slide highlights what I highlighted earlier in terms of our source of revenue. What you should focus your lens here on is that our source of revenue comes from property taxes. Over 90% of our revenue comes from property taxes. And given the low level of construction, obviously that puts some constraints in terms of the growth in terms of property taxes. In fact, every dollar that we actually added to the budget means that property taxes go up because of the low level of growth that we have from construction. In addition to that, contributing to that is actually state aid and local receipts that are forecasted to be flat in this particular forecast. So what that will result in, and what this means, is an average property tax increase of about $518, I believe it was, from $15,278 to $15,798. That is a 3.4% increase for the average household. And one of the things to note in regards to this in terms of home valuation, if you look at the home valuation, it is not very large year to year. In fact, over the last 10 years, it's represented as about 5.6% property value increase over the 10 years average. not each year, over the 10 years. In contrast to that, a 38% increase in the budget over that 10 years is a cumulative aggregate growth of 3.2%. So as you kind of see from that standpoint, it ends up increasing the tax rates in order to be able to raise the taxes as opposed to getting it from the valuation of the properties in homes. So another source here in terms of the revenue is our fund transfers. If you note here from a free cash perspective, we allocate a certain amount of our free cash to supporting the budget. Last year, we had $75,000 to fund our OPEB liabilities, as well as support for long-term capital requests. This year, we put the $250,000 against the long-term capital requests, which are in the warrant book. Ambulance fund last year, significant drop. The $300,000 was actually used for a purchase of a new ambulance, and stabilization. All the highlight here is overlay surplus was a one-time funding source for last year. It occurs every few years. I think we are able to get an assessment of that and potentially apply that potentially to the budget. But last year was the year that we had it. This year we did not have that favorability. So the way that leaves us in terms of utilization of the transfers, free cash and stabilization funds, $3.4 million in reserves. Our budget is about $30.8 million. That is about 11% reserve. Our goal is to keep that reserve between 10 and 12%. As you see there, is right in the middle. So that keeps us with financial strength and stability. So now on the expense side, you actually heard earlier that our core operating expense growth, $3.7 million, overall growth of 1.9%. Due to the lower capital appropriation. The ambulance was one of those things that happened last year. They're not happening this year. But you see from this particular slide, you see the large portion of our budget is really due to education. Both Carlisle Public Schools as well as the Concord Carlisle High School. We'll have a little bit more detailed slides coming up, as well as town departments. So between those two, you have about 82% of our budget, and then you have insurance and benefits, debt service, and the capital appropriations articles this year represent about 2% of the budget ask. This leads to a $31.5 million town expense sum for this year. In terms of growth, education budget for this year increased about 3 and change. Town departments, about 3.6%. Insurance, benefit, and retirement, 9.7%. Debt service, we had some debt come off the books, so it's about 4.2% less this year. And then capital appropriations, you saw, I commented earlier that there is a decrease in capital appropriations. It's about a 40% decrease from last year. This highlights what I said earlier in terms of our increasing expenses in terms of wages and benefits. Wages incorporate about 70 to 75% of our budget, and increases for existing employees increase the total budget by more than 2%. 2% was what we had for COLA this year, but then you add on top of that step edits and all those other types of things that happen in terms of the year as they go along. So it's north of 2%. And you also see earlier I highlighted the aspect of insurance and benefits, the ever-growing responsibility or being able to keep up with it. Group insurance increased by 11%. That's an add of about $142,000. County retirement 6.4, and then OPEB liability, we're trying to address that with an additional $50,000 that we're kind of contributing this year. All right, so as I said earlier, education was about 62% of our budget. Total increase for this year was $685,000 and change. CPS is roughly broken out evenly in terms of that increase between CPS and CCRSD. $11.6 million for CPS, an increase of 3.1%. CCRSD was $6.5 million, an increase of 5.6%, and that $6.5 million is our contribution to that. So we split that with Concord, and there's a slide later that tells you what our share of the overall expense is. You see here also vocational education, an increase of 23.6%. Seems like a big percentage, but you look at the denominator, it's 129,000. But that also highlights the swing in that, additional student with transportation costs causes, a jump percentage-wise. All right, so one slide on Carlisle Public School in terms of operational budget being at 11.6%, a 3.1% increase over FY19. One thing to highlight here is there was kind of a, I don't know if accounting change is the best word for that, but essentially the $25,000 in annual maintenance that was typically in long-term caps was kind of pushed into the operating budget. So this year, that kind of bumped up the percentage increase by a little bit. If you strip that out, it's at 2.9%. But ongoing, that won't be a factor. It's just a comment for this year. So if you actually take a look at here, the increase on average outside the big jump and the drop, which I think if you average it, it'll probably ends up somewhere in the middle of the 2.3 to 3.4% each year, as you see on this chart. For the Concord Carlisle High School, the operating budget without debt, you see is at $30.2 million, and that's the total. Flip here. Catch up on my notes. All right. So that total growth is including debt of 3.9. This is without debt, but including debt, which some debt came off the books, was 3.9%. Lower due to the reduction of the debt service. Our share, however, as you kind of see in the next slide, increased a little bit over last year. So you saw last year, due to the enrollment of our students in the high school, there was an adjustment in terms of our assessment. Went down to like a 24.5%. This year ticked up a little bit, so it didn't fully adjust back up to the top, but ticked up a little bit, which actually brings our contribution up a little bit. It's 24.75% in terms of our assessment for FY 2020. The 5-year CAGR here being our side of the contribution is 1.7, but in part you kind of see the growth was kind of dropped a little bit last year due to the fact that there's an assessment adjustment in terms of the percentage of our contribution to the school. So that is in sum the revenue and the expense side of our budget. As we said earlier, limited avenues for increasing revenue. Most of our taxes are through property taxes. And in that, the increase in terms of the valuation of the homes is not increasing at the paces of our expenses. Budget pressures as a result will not ease, and we need to remain focused on, and we do this as a part of the budget process, and limiting the rate of increase of expenses because our revenues do not increase commensurately without large increases to the taxpayer. This comes through management of human resources, as well as thinking about operational efficiencies and how we do things. But then I think importantly for us tonight is really prioritization. There'll be warrants tonight that have financial implications. Well, that goes into part of the expense in our budget. So prioritization and budgetary trade-offs is also a part of being able to manage this town budget. And so in sum, we actually have our balanced operating budget that we are tasked to provide of $30.8 million, or almost $30.9 million, a 3.7% increase over last year. This is an average property tax increase of $518, and as we showed it earlier, this maintains appropriate reserves of about 11% in between the range of 10 and 12%. And that ends the presentation.
Thank you very much. So, first, we'll take the recommendations of the various town boards and committees. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support the article, and the Finance Committee was also, that was a unanimous vote, correct? Did any other town boards or committees take a position on this article? Usually not. Okay. So before we proceed to opening the floor for debate, just because we've got different pieces of the budget, we'll go through and, similar to the procedure on the consent agenda, what I'm going to do is review each of the top line items, general government, protection of persons and property, et cetera, the boldface in your motion handout. And if you either want to ask a question, you'd like to have a debate, or you'd like to actually have a separate vote on that particular category of the budget, you just say hold, and that way we can have a focused debate on each section of the budget if we need it. Is all that clear? Okay, and again, over in the cafeteria, if you want to hold on any of those items, please let the assistant moderator know, and I will check in with her at the end to see if there were any holds. So, general government, a total of $1,446,075. No hold on that, okay. Public Works, $1,214,365. Oh, I'm sorry. Very good, thank you. I'm glad somebody's paying attention here. Protection of persons and property is $2,912,020. Is there a hold on that? Okay, now on to Public Works, $1,214,365. Health and Human Services, $352,017. Education, $19,366,767. Any holds on that? Okay, we have a hold on education. Culture and Recreation, $831,059. Insurance and Fringe Benefits, $3,080,687. Hold on that. Okay. Unclassified, $152,000. Any holds? And debt, $1,516,928. Any holds on that? Hold on the debt. And assistant moderator, in the cafeteria, were there holds on any items?
No holds.
Okay, great, thank you. So, we then go back to education. And did someone want to speak to that? I recognize Mr. Ballantyne. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First, I want to just
Name and address, please.
John Ballantyne, 268 Fisk Street. First, I want to thank the Finance Committee, the School Committee, and the Board of Selectmen for pulling together the warrant article and particularly the budget. However, the question that I want to ask around the schools is often, over the past several years, we've had a mailing sent to us about the school budget, the CPS school budget, and we often get that at the town meeting. And so very carefully worked out, going through the quality of our education and the expense and cost. We have not had that this year. And so I guess the question that I have is, and I know in reading the Mosquito, we've seen that the Finance Committee and the School Committee have wrestled hard with maintaining the high quality of our education within budget constraints. And what was just pointed out is, of course, the constant average growth has been between 2% and 3% over the past 10 years, and as we know, enrollment has dropped from over 800 to the 600 range. So I think the challenge, and this is what I would like people to address, is how do we maintain high quality of education and do it in a cost-effective way, which obviously affects our taxes.
Okay, so that's kind of a broad general question. I'm not going to ask anyone to address it unless you have something more specific within the budget about this year's budget, how to strike that balance or whatever.
So I think the school committee, because the school committee has been wrestling with this all the time, is how to maintain the quality of the school and keep the budget increases from going up, particularly as we see enrollment. How do you do this in a cost-effective way? So I think that is the issue that the school committee has wrestled with, and I would just like them to address it, because usually we get this in a long handout explaining what's going on, and frankly, I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, and I know they're going to be doing this in the master plan, but maybe Dave Modell at the school committee can talk about how they're wrestling with being cost-effective, cutting.
Okay, yeah, so let's make it very, very specific. I want to let the question, as reframed, will be, how did you wrestle with it this year? What were the trade-offs and decisions that are reflected in this year's school budget? Does someone from the school committee or the school administration, or finance committee, I don't care which one, whoever is appropriate who would like to address that. Okay, please. And yeah, you feel free to come to the front since you're speaking in an official capacity and introduce yourself.
David Modell, School Committee Chair. So number one, John, appreciate your efforts to help us frame the argument. We didn't do a flyer this year. Again, trade-offs, that's an expense that we didn't undertake. Perhaps we should take that on for other years. But we did provide a handout that is available as people came in, which highlights the accomplishments of the school. We all love the schools, and the accomplishments are well known. I'm not going to go into them here. But it is obviously a challenge that enrollments have been, we think, stabilized now at a lower level, but clearly lower than they had been in decades past. As everyone knows, the majority of the budget is essentially fixed cost, whether it's true fixed cost, as in facilities, energy, and so forth, or relatively fixed or sort of sticky costs in terms of salaries, wages being, the biggest driver. Those of you who follow it in the paper know that we've wrestled a lot this year. For example, next year we will be contracting one section of 5th grade, and there's been a lot of debate and discussion about that, and we're looking at many models going forward if the new reality is in the 600 or so school population. So that's a long-term problem that we clearly have to address. In the short term, again, we have worked very closely with the Finance Committee to develop a budget that we felt met what we call level service, so providing the services to the children, but within the constraints. And we didn't get everything that we asked for from the Finance Committee. We recognize that they have to wrestle with many competing priorities. And so we are also absorbing internally costs that we had hoped to have funded, and we have to make some adjustments to make it work. And every year with the school administration, we work closely and pretty hard to try to do that. So we're very conscientious of the town's dollars. We're grateful for them. The average, as Victor showed, is around 3% a year, this year not being an exception. There are many unfunded type mandates that have higher increases than we can pass along, and so we do whatever we can to maintain, first and foremost, the educational standards that everyone in Carlisle is accustomed to.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak on the education article? Do we have it at microphone 3 there?
Okay, Bob Clark on Robbins Drive. I know that the school committee's budget is sort of the big albatross around our necks, but Mr. Ballantyne did quite a job in trying to figure out how many students we're going to have in the future. The one thing he noticed is that about a third of the people in the town are retired, so we're not going to be sending too many more kids to the schools. Back in the 90s, the education, I had 2 daughters, both went on to higher education. They did a very good job. But it was about the same number then as it is today. And it seems that the costs, the overhead costs, are so much higher. And I understand that the salaries increases, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing that gets me is, back in 08 and 09, when some people were losing their jobs, some people kept their jobs and didn't get increases for years, we kept on increasing the teacher salaries. And we hear about how great our school system is and how great the teachers are and how they really love teaching here. Well, sometimes there's a trade-off there with, if you got, solid parents behind you, that's a cost. And then I think the last thing that really got me was a year or 2 ago, they felt that they needed some more supervision, managers, supervisors, whatever you want to call it. And lo and behold, they found $130,000. They were so strapped that year, but they found $130,000 to pay another supervisor. Why? Maybe we should find a couple $100,000 to start reducing the school budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about education? Okay, let's then move on. We also had a hold on the debt line item. Did someone wish to speak to that? Yes, at microphone 1, please introduce yourself.
I'm Jonathan Supnick, 284 Acton Street. So I just noticed that our debt service is roughly 5% of the budget, and I'm wondering, since we've heard from the Finance Committee that as squeezed as we are now, it's going to get worse in the future, maybe we could take some steps to start allocating a capital fund so that when we do future projects, we don't have to borrow to pay for them, and this line item can start decreasing and make room for other stuff.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the debt? All right. Since any of you who asked for the holds on the education and debt can disagree with me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like these were not particularly objections such that we need a separate vote on those line items. Is that correct? So we can just vote on the budget as a whole. All right, then we will proceed to do that since there doesn't seem to be any more debate. The adoption of the budget is a majority vote, and we have a total recommended budget of $30,871,918. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, we have a few nays here. Assistant moderator in the cafeteria?
All ayes.
All ayes. Okay, well, I declare that we have a majority quite clearly, and it passes, and I so declare. We're now on to Article 11, special appropriations to various departments. I recognize Kate Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $22,000 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen to conduct studies, provide services, and facilitate projects for the items listed in the motions handbook.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to repeat that in a second. My apology, my mistake. The budget included a transfer, and therefore it required a 2/3 vote rather than a majority. That under our town bylaw, I can declare 2/3 on a voice vote. That vote clearly had more than 2/3, so I declare that it passed by greater than 2/3. All right? Okay. Ms. Reed, please repeat yourself.
Okay. I'm just going to move that Article 11 be moved as printed in the motions handbook.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Could you speak to the article? And could we have the lights
That's all right.
on the stage, please?
All right.
Thank you.
This article would permit special appropriations outside of the town operating budget for consultants, services, and other unanticipated expenses. And the selectmen voted unanimously to support this article.
Okay, thank you. And we also had a unanimous recommendation from FinCom. Any other boards or committees with recommendations? Okay, any debate on the special appropriations? Seeing none, we will proceed to a vote. This is a majority vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
All ayes.
All ayes. Motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. Article 12, funding for the town master plan. I recognize Mr. Gambino.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $160,000 to be expended by the Master Plan Steering Committee for those costs associated with the preparation of a master plan, including consultant services, ancillary town costs associated with the preparation and presentation of the plan, and the management of the planning process.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I recognize Ms. Jan Corneal to speak to the motion. And if we could have the lights back down. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Jan Corneal. I'm the chair of the Master Plan Steering Committee. I'm here tonight to request your support for $160,000 to undertake a comprehensive master plan for the town of Carlisle. There are so many good things happening in the far corners of Carlisle, and many committed citizens who are working tirelessly to improve the town. In order to reap the full benefit of all of our hard work and to ensure that we do not work at cross purposes, we need a master plan that can help us align our priorities and guide our combined efforts. Indeed, some of the challenges we face today as a town, a rising tax burden, declining school enrollment, an aging demographic, and the existential threat of climate change will not be solved by individual efforts, but we need collective, coordinated action. We are the city of the woods. Let's stop to consider the forest for the trees. Why does this matter to all of us? Our taxes cannot continue to support rising town costs and investments without new sources of revenue, as we've heard. Our school enrollment needs to grow and stabilize for us to be cost effective. I'm not pressing buttons. Our housing needs to change to attract young families and allow us to age in place, even me. Our community needs different services and amenities to adjust to changing demographics. Our rural character requires ongoing maintenance and investment to maintain our natural and cultural resources. And our town center needs new zoning and programming to be a more attractive and walkable heart to our community. And we need a plan to mitigate and adapt to climate change. The master plan will provide Carlisle with a roadmap and a financial strategy for aligning our resources and our needs with realistic budgets and steps for implementation. It will create a citizens forum led by planning experts to discuss our points of difference and understand the trade-offs of our decisions and agree on our shared priorities. And it will provide a guiding framework for comprehensive policy and zoning amendments that will meet master plan requirements and help the town secure additional grants in the future. And it's not a wish list. Why do we need it? Engaging in a master plan process now is important. Carlisle is at a crossroads, as we've heard several times tonight. Business as usual is not sustainable. Carlisle's population is aging, school enrollment is declining, town costs are rising, and income and housing values are flat. To sustain our high quality of life and maintain our values, we need to be bold and creative, and we need to explore new ideas, not just the ones we talk about year after year. The master plan will create a citizens forum with all of you, and hopefully more, of our town membership for discussing and reaching consensus on tough issues that we don't agree on. And we need a roadmap to guide decisions. It's the way we will explore new sources of revenue and plan for expenditures over multiple years and prioritize future community needs. Many of you have asked why we need to hire a planning consultant, a firm, to do the master plan and not just do it ourselves. Given our financial challenges today, we're looking for a strategic plan, an actionable roadmap, and a living document, something that we can carry around in our pockets and under our arms as we hike through the woods and across the fields. Where was I? It's a labor-intensive process that requires a focused amount of time. Volunteer committees like ourselves and town employees don't have the bandwidth to undertake this effort internally. We need professionals with expertise that some of us have professionally, but it's a broad array of expertise that a planning consultant team would bring, including urban planning, community engagement, housing, sustainability, civil engineering, and a host of other professional expertise that a planning firm would bring to our process. And we need an objective facilitator who can craft a public process that guides our community towards consensus. A planning consultant brings new perspective, ideas, best practices. They work all over so they can bring their experiences to us and help guide us and help us to understand how we can run our town better and make better choices. Oh, I missed a, sorry, okay. I just want to add that the master plan cost represents about 0.1% of our 5-year budget. And we don't think twice about hiring a financial advisor or an insurance broker to help us navigate the future with more confidence and security. Why would we not make this small investment this year to plan for our future in our town, given where we're at? Together, we must ensure that Carlisle is a healthy, thriving community with a good place to live for you, your children, and for future generations. What is a sustainable community? It means economic sustainability, that we have the financial resources to manage the town and invest in a future without unrealistic tax increases year after year. That we have a sustainable community where we're attracting young families with kids, but we're taking care of all of our citizens, including the elderly. Environmental sustainability, where we're conserving our forests and our farms, and we're embracing a community-wide strategy to manage our energy and water resources, and we're addressing governance and public process challenges. So the Master Plan Steering Committee is proposing a budget of $160,000, and we're asking for your support tonight. We've done our research. The cost for a consultant team is $135,000, and the cost for ancillary cost for town expenses is $25,000. So we've worked tirelessly to prepare this information for you, and we have the support of numerous committees and boards, and we'd like your support tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So, with that, just to run down, we do have the results, the recommendations from various committees. Planning Board voted unanimously 6-0. Board of Selectmen unanimously 5-0. FinCom, did we have a recommendation on this?
Yep, 4-0.
4-0, thank you. School Committee, unanimous vote in favor. Historical Commission, also unanimous in favor. The Energy Task Force voted, this is slight nuance to what you see in your motion handbook. The Energy Force voted to support a master plan, but not necessarily expenditure of funds. Conservation Commission voted to support Article 12, as did the Carlisle Trails Committee. Did any other towns or boards vote on this? And Mr. Zog, did I accurately state the Energy Task Force position? Okay, good, thank you. So with that, the floor is open for debate, and I recognize the gentleman at microphone 2.
Ken Mostello, 30 Kimball Road. I'm also the chair of the Board of Assessors. The Board of Assessors unanimously voted to endorse the voted to endorse Article 12 as well.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone wish to be recognized? Mr. Anderson.
Ralph Anderson, 433 Baldwin Road. In the Master Planning Advisory Committee, we were told that the master plan would be used by many other committees other than just the planning board. I'd like somebody to give some concrete examples of how other committees and departments would use the master plan.
Okay. What I will, let's see, do we have from the master plan committee, do we have a couple of very quick specific things that you could offer up in response to that? Thank you.
So, one thing is that the master plan will create the context for, prepare the sort of the conceptual plan for the housing production plan, as well as the open space and recreation plan. Both of those things will happen concurrently with the master plan, and they will feed into each other. We can imagine that there's a, do you want to say something, Pete? You go ahead.
So what we hope to get out of the master
Please
plan.
identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Pete Gambino, 280 Stony Gate, Chair of the Planning Board, also on the Master Plan Steering Committee. What we really hope to get out of the master planning process is a guiding framework for the town. The guiding framework is going to be, for a concrete issue or a concrete thing like you asked, is going to be something that the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom can start to use to prioritize our expenditures in town. Is housing a priority? Are pathways a priority? Is trying to build a community, more of a heart of a community, a town center, a priority? What are those priorities we have? Right now, the boards don't do too much intercommunication with each other to try to work that out ahead of time. This master plan is going to be that document and that process, more importantly, that's going to bring these different boards together. We have liaisons from the different boards on the advisory committee. We also have some liaisons on the steering committee. This is going to be that process where we hope to work together with everybody to get that framework where we can get a process in place to help us prioritize expenditures in town and also look at new revenue. Look at something zoning. So you bring up something else, outside the planning board. Well, if we have to do zoning, with the planning board, we can't do that in a vacuum, right? We need to work with the Board of Selectmen, and we need to look at all the different consequences of rezoning a certain area. So as we look at that, it is a coordinated effort between all the boards that we hope to get.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, sir.
Propose an amendment.
You've had your shot. There are other people waiting to speak. We can come back around to you. Mr. Levitan? Is that, I'm sorry.
Oh, this is Shervin Ayadi, 649 Autumn Lane.
Yeah, please. I'm sorry. At microphone 4. I'm sorry.
And thank you for explanation. I do oppose this. It's not.
I'm sorry, could you state your name and address again?
Shervin Ayadi, 649 Autumn Lane.
Okay, please proceed.
I do oppose this. And it's not the money, but the explanation that was given now is very different than what's written here. If we need a process, this should be explained that we need consulting to come and help us with the process, not a master plan that I wonder how many times have tried. Different towns have master plans and it's been then back tested. Did it really work 5-10 years later? So it's not just the money and everything else, but it seems like expenditure in a town that we say we are tight in revenues. And that's where I don't agree with this approach.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 2, please.
John Drinkwater, 235 Fifth Street. So, I commend people, the work that's been done, and I wish I studied more about everything, but there was a few things I read in the paper that concerned me. I've been in Carlisle for 30 years, and for most of those years, we were always trying to prevent people from building homes. And we were trying to prevent people from building big homes with big tax bills because we were going to have children in our schools that were going to raise the school budget, and that was going to cost all of us taxes. Now, all of a sudden, it's going to save us money to build 2,500 square foot homes where we have nothing. I wish I could go into a small house. And they're going to be on smaller lots, and they're going to cost less, and they're going to have less tax revenue, and somehow what before was going to cost me more now is going to cost me less. I mean, if I said that right, meaning that it used to be, don't let houses be built, let's buy all the land in town ourselves because it'll raise the school budget. And two, now it's, let's build as much as we can. And I know I'm exaggerating a little bit because we want to lower the school budget. I have trouble with that logic. The second thing is that I do believe a consultant can come in this town and can give us a lot of really good ideas. You know, is expand the tax space. What does that mean? To me, that means you're going to bring in industry, you're going to bring in business. This town for years has just not wanted to do that. It's Carlisle. We don't want to do that. We don't want Walmart on Route 225. We don't want McDonald's in here. We will find a way to keep these people out. We've done it for 50, 60 years. So they could come, I envision we could get this great plan that solves all these problems and we'll never implement it because we are a group of different people in Carlisle. And I don't always agree with what we do here, like spending a lot of money on a school that we're never going to use, Highland, but we do, you know, because we want to preserve that old building. So when the consultant says rip the place down because you're paying money for something you're not using, we won't rip it down. So that's the problem I'm having with this whole thing, is that we're going to spend $160,000 and never do one thing that they tell us, even though they may give us the most brilliant output. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Okay, so I didn't say it at the beginning, but I did say listen respectfully. And one of the things about listening respectfully is we're not judging. You'll judge when you vote which speakers were persuasive and not. So there's no applause, there's no booing. Okay? But I'm sure Mr. Drinkwater appreciated your appreciation. And no one else will be offended if you don't applaud for them. Since we have a little bit of a backup at microphone 2, I'll ask microphone 2 to proceed, and then we'll get on to microphone 1. Please, sir, introduce yourself.
My name is Ranjan Matthew, 120 Sunset Road. I've been here since 1987. And if there's one thing I've seen over the years, forget all the trends, is that people are being pushed out of their houses simply because they can't afford the taxes. These are good people who lived here for many years, and we think of ourselves as a community. And we worry about the birds and the bees, but we don't worry about our seniors. And I think that's not the kind of community we want to grow into. I listen to everything that's going on here, and it's almost like we are frozen in our legacy. And because of that, I really commend the plan and the efforts behind the plan. I think it's extremely good. The only thing I would say is that the plan has to be thoughtful in the sense that it's not a plan for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It's a plan that continuously iterates. And I think there are lots of things, if you look in the digital domain, that we can transfer into the plan itself, you know, which really can make us a community with a sustainable plan that engages the people in the town. And to that extent, I question why we need the consultant, but let's use them as a start. But then this is our business. This is our plan. This is the community plan for Carlisle and not the community plan for the consultant. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 1.
Bob Supnick, 601 Heald Road. I support the master planning effort. I'd point out that the surrounding towns like Concord, Acton, Boxborough, and so forth have implemented and followed their plans with great success. It's precisely that we do not have a way that we can all agree upon to get out of the scissors crisis of capped revenues and rising expenses. That means we must have a guiding plan that looks beyond this year's budget. Because if we don't, we'll be in the same position next year, where the only thought is how do we cap expenses? Can we grow revenue? I do not know. Will the implications of that be things the town will accept? I don't know that either. But we must put the propositions on the table, engage everyone in town, and not look backward at the orneriness of the population, which I have been part of for 40 years, as being the mandatory outcome for the future. Let's define our future. Let's set our future the way we would like it for ourselves, our children, and their children. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knock at microphone 5.
Cindy Knock, 41 Canterbury Court. At the League Forum, Candidates Forum yesterday, this issue was raised about accountability and how do we keep this a living document and actually make sure that we work on it year after year. And one idea that was floated was that the Select Board should request of all the towns and boards and committees that in their reports at the town, on the town report, that they actually address the issue of the master plan and how they have made progress working towards it. Or if they have not made progress, what has impeded them from making progress. So I thought that was a good idea and it should be given to the Select Board.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 4.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Nuremberg. I'm at 525 East Street. I'm a volunteer with the Master Plan Steering Committee. I've been a volunteer on this effort for close to 2 years. Over that time, as part of this process, we have reached out. We've done a lot of research into what other towns have done and how they've had a successful master plan process. And we can tell you based on our research, and someone else mentioned this, so in the interest of time, I don't want to repeat it, but Acton, Bedford, Boxborough, Concord, all these towns have invested in a master plan. They've all talked about the ways in which they've used their plan to guide spending decisions, to prioritize projects for the town. These are living documents. It's not just the plan at the end of a year. It's a year-long process of bringing us all together to figure out what we want for our town, putting it into a roadmap. That roadmap, will include performance metrics so that we can be sure that we're implementing it, we're moving forward successfully. We are holding our elected officials and fellow volunteers accountable for ensuring that we're implementing those priorities as we identify them through the process. So I hope that that helps to assuage some of your concerns. It is an investment, but I do believe it's a worthwhile one, based on what we need for our town and based on what I've seen other towns accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 2.
Hi, I'm Carl Klein from 59 Fern Lane. My question, or some of my comments are, $160,000 seems a little over the top, and seeing as we're all here tonight basically for budgetary reasons, that the price seems to be over the top. But can we get some economics from other towns that have done this and use their templates and help expedite the process and maybe save some of those funds? I don't, it's an event once, used many times theory. And as I'm listening here to some of the speakers and the presentation, it sounds like it's going to be a mandate for our committees, our Board of Selectmen, and the schools is the way it's being presented. And I'm kind of concerned about that. I would like our committees and our Board of Selectmen to operate independently and use it as a guideline, but not as a measuring tool. Can anybody speak? Is it going to be a mandate?
Okay, I'll recognize, who would like to take that, Mr. Gambino or Ms. Corneal? Either one of you, please address that.
First of all, I'd like to say that the master planning process is our process. We hire a consultant to help us undertake the process. So the master plan itself is something that is our effort and it's our content. It embodies our goals and it's our path forward. It's our way of getting things done. To address your question about the cost, We did a very rigorous analysis of the cost of master planning from, and I got a little speeded up, so I didn't manage it in my presentation, of 5 towns, and got good data from Concord, Acton, Boxborough, and Bedford, and did an analysis in the range of costs, if you add both the consultant cost and the town staff costs, because many of those towns have significant planning staff in-house, which we do not have. We have some, but we do not have nearly what Bedford or Concord have. And the price tag ranged between $145,000 and $280,000. For Concord, $145,000 for Boxborough, which is a town that's really similar to ours. So we did a very rigorous analysis of what the most efficient way of doing this process would be, and came up with the $135,000 for a consultant. And so I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, thank you. And then just to clarify, so it's $135,000 for the consultant?
Correct.
And then the other $25,000 is for?
It's for town-related costs. What we found in our research was all of those towns there were some unexpected things that occurred, some costs that they had to fund, like organizing community meetings and, doing surveys, updating some of their mapping to support the master plan consultant.
Is this incremental?
Okay.
Incremental?
Thank you. We don't have back and forth.
Gotcha.
I'm going to move to microphone 4 now.
I didn't get the mandate question.
I'm sorry?
I wanted to second directly answer the question he asked about the guiding, about the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry, that was not addressed. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of directly answer your question about this. This is not a mandate. This document is going to come out. It's going to be a documentation of our principles, right, of a town. What are the things that are important to this town? What are the things that the town needs? And that's what we want to focus on. So it's not going to be a document that the Board of Selectmen have to follow, but it's going to be a document that will give them some guidance, because right now we don't have that in this town. We don't have a comprehensive document that all the boards can look at as they're looking at their goals for the year and try to say, hey, yeah, this is what's important to the town. This is what we want to go for. So it won't be something that if we give it to the Board of Selectmen, or when we give it to the Board of Selectmen, that they have to do, but it'll be something that'll help them in their decision-making process. And we really hope that this document is, when Janet's saying ours, what we mean by ours is ours. Not just the Master Plan Steering Committee, not just the Planning Board, the whole committee. We want to do something in this town that hasn't been done since 1963, or 61 is the last master plan in this town. We want to do something where we can get the whole community involved in this and get everybody on board. And there's going to be contentions, right? Not everyone's going to agree. That's why we need a facilitator. We need to be able to sit down and find out, what do we need to do in this town? What do we need to do to make this town economically sustainable? And what do we need to do in this town to move it forward? Well, moving forward is not a Walmart's. Moving forward is not the Dunkin' Donuts. The only good Dunkin' Donuts sign was on April 1st, in front of Kimball's. That's it, right? That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to look at the culture we have in this town, look at our values that we have in this town, and get that into a process that can help define where we move forward. Because we got to do something, right? We got to make this town economically sustainable.
Okay, I think you've answered the question. Microphone 4.
Lee Tatisha, 130 Oak Knoll Road. I've also been on the Carlisle Conservation Commission for something like 8 years. And what I'd like to speak to is our experience with the Open Space and Recreation Plan, which we produce routinely with a staff of very burned out volunteers. Very, very burned out volunteers, and we're currently recruiting and not getting a lot of success from more volunteers. However, that Open Space and Recreation Plan has enabled us to get funding from outside of Carlisle for some of our projects. We're able to point and say, this is an identified priority for us, this parcel, this piece of conservation, and we've got funding from feds, from the state, and from other conservation organizations like CCF, and it helps us justify not just funding priorities in town, but to those who might be able to bring us more funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, back to you.
Yes, I would like to make a motion for an amendment to the article.
Okay.
Upon completion, by adding the following to the article. Upon completion of the master plan by the Master Plan Steering Committee, the master plan shall be submitted to an annual town meeting for approval by a majority vote by those attending, and to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that it be submitted as a question for approval by majority vote at the next town election.
And do you have that in writing?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So while Mr. Anderson is walking that up here, the amendment is to add a requirement that the master plan after completion be brought back to town meeting for approval and a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they submit it at the ballot. And is there a second to Mr. Anderson's amendment? Do we have a second? Mr. Anderson, you may have 3 minutes to speak to that.
Thank you. If I was the owner of an old house that needed some work, maybe some improvements, maybe a new kitchen, a roof, or an addition, and I needed to be spiffed up, but I had a limited budget, I hired an architect to help me organize and schedule and prioritize my needs. Then, when I paid the architect, I would expect to accept his plan or reject it, or reject parts of it, or look for a new plan. Since the town meeting is being asked to pay for the advice of these consultants and the makers of the plan, these people will be setting goals for many parts of the town. It seems to me that the town meeting should be able to accept or reject this consultant's advice at the end of it. That's why I'm proposing that it be a vote for the town meeting and presumably for a town ballot issue.
Okay, thank you. So, you can sit down now if you like. So let's be clear where we are now. The discussion on the main motion is now on hold, and we are now considering the amendment offered by Mr. Anderson. The amendment is in two parts, and I just want to explain it because it's a little bit different than things that we usually encounter here. So the first part says that the plan after completion would be brought back to to a future town meeting, and that town meeting would have the opportunity to vote it up or down for acceptance. The second half of the amendment is a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they also submit to the ballot at a town election for approval of the master plan. The reason that's a recommendation is the town meeting, what's on the ballot is controlled by the selectmen. Town meeting can't tell the selectmen what they must do, but town meeting may express its opinion to the selectmen about what they ought to do. So that's why the first half of this is a requirement that it come back to town meeting because you are town meeting, you get to control it, and then a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. So we're now open for debate on the amendment at microphone 4.
I'm not speaking to the amendment.
Well, then you'll have to sit down and step back up when we get to the main motion, unless you have a procedural motion to make.
No.
No, okay, so you'll just have to wait. We're only speaking about the amendment at this point. At microphone 2.
I was not speaking about the amendment. I was going to
We're
speak.
only about the amendment at this point. Mr. Friedman.
David Friedman, 301 Hutchins Road. While I appreciate the spirit behind the proposed amendment, I think it raises the same question that Mr. Gambino tried to answer in terms of whether this is a mandate or a guidance document, and I think we would run into the same problem trying to define what accepting the plan means. I can imagine that if we voted at town meeting to reject the plan, that would mean something, but it's not clear to me that what accepting the plan would mean, whether it would imply that it was therefore more of a guidance document or more of a mandate. So I'm opposed to this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Levitan.
Mark Levitan, 105 Wolf Rock Road. I'm opposed to the amendment too. I think it complicates things, and I'm going to agree with David Friedman on this. And that's that this is not a mandate. It's the product of our work that's coming up with a facilitator, not somebody who's going to tell us what to do. And the quality will be our own work. So it can't decide the other things the plan will recommend that the town will then have to vote on in future town meetings. So I'm opposed to this.
Okay, thank you. Do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
David Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. I would have assumed that the town would approve the plan once it was complete. So I support this amendment. I think the town should have a chance to say, is this really where we want to see the town go? Saying that we think this is the direction we want to go does not necessarily make it a mandate, but it does say their general agreement. So I would support this amendment.
Thank you. At microphone 3.
Kathy McDonald, 33 Knoll Farm. And I think I oppose the amendment, and specifically because the way the process has been described, as I understand it, it is our process. It is we, those of us here at the town meeting, that will be engaged, that will have our voices heard, that will get to influence what we think the outcomes should be, and that with a highly engaged process where our voices are already being heard, and it is the voices of the community and of the town that are creating the outcomes that is this plan. So I would hope that, with a quality process that I know that would be designed for us, it will be a bit of a moot point to need to come back to town meeting, because it will already be representative of the majority of the voices and the viewpoints of the town.
All right, Mr. Gambino?
Sure. I'm not going to say if I support or approve or not support the amendment, but I had really one point for town council that I wanted to ask, which was this: master plan.
You get to ask you can say you want to ask, and I'll decide whether you get an answer.
So the deal is this, right? Massachusetts state law basically is the governing authority on the master plan. They mandate that towns have the master plan and that the planning board is the authority that approves the master plan. But with that said, I did want to ask town council if he has seen this in other towns where they bring a master plan to town meeting, and if it is something that's been done before, or if it's not. No.
We'll take town council's answer on that.
Thank you. Tom Harrington, Town Council. So I've seen master plans presented at town meetings. I've never seen a town meeting vote upon a master plan.
Okay, at microphone 4.
Bob McCauley, 129 Log Hill Road. I support the amendment because I think while the Master Planning Committee will have input from citizens who choose to get involved, I don't think it will include the whole town. So I think having the master plan reviewed at town meeting, where we get a larger group of people who maybe haven't been involved, get to see what they have done, the Master Planning Committee, and make an informed opinion. And I think it'll give the master plan more weight to have it reviewed at town meeting and voted on, even though, as we're hearing, it isn't a mandate. But I just think it would be a good democratic process.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, town council has suggested a clarifying amendment, and I wonder if you would accept it. It's just to put at the end where you're recommending that it be put to a town election. He's suggesting adding the words, immediately following the town meeting at which it was presented. So in other words, you wouldn't have a long gap. Is that acceptable to you? Okay, thank you. So we'll reread, it doesn't really change the substance of what we're debating here, but we will reread it before you vote on it so everyone understands what we're considering. At microphone 2.
Hi, Peg Schaefer, Heald Road. As I understand it, the master plan is going to make suggestions for all the different committees and different things that we do. And so I see the master plan being a wealth of different ideas and proposals. And then from that will come specific plans or proposals to be presented at town meeting. It seems to me too broad to say that we will accept the whole town plan or reject the whole town plan. There will be elements, as one speaker noted, we will accept and some we won't. So that's my viewpoint, so I don't support it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes, about the amendment, I think having this amendment will kill the plan before it starts.
Okay, could you please identify yourself?
Ranjan Matthew, 120 Sunset Road. I think this amendment will kill the master plan idea, concept, whatever, process before it even starts, simply because the master plan fundamentally will ask a lot of people in town, a lot of people in the town hall to spend a lot of time. And if all that time is going to be wasted and then you come here and you suddenly don't know whether it's up or down, nobody's going to spend any time. And I'm sure there are lots of towns that have used the master plan as a model, and we can surely learn from them. Because I'm very afraid that if we don't have the master plan, we'll be back here with another $750, $800 increase in our taxes. Because what's happening is we don't have an integrated approach. Everybody is fighting for their own little pet peeve, and that'll always be the case, unless you have a coordination that makes it all work together. And you'll build more houses, you'll drive more elderly people out of the town, and that will be the community that this will evolve into. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 1.
Hello, I'm
Please identify yourself.
Henry Hedden from East Ryan Drive. Thank you. I would just like to clarify, regardless of whether this amendment is accepted, will the findings of the master plan be presented at a town meeting?
That is an excellent question. Does the Master Plan Steering Committee have any proposals on that?
If Mr. Moderator would be so nice to give us some time in town meeting, we would love to present it.
So we'll have to see. Just to explain briefly, I get a lot of requests to present things informationally to town meeting because it's a great forum. If I said yes to every one of those requests, then we would have, well, we might as well just move to Concord and do those 3- and 4-night town meetings, right? So I don't normally say yes, but since, if the request is to do something that seems to only come around once every 50 years in Carlisle, I might, without tying my hands, I might be a little bit more committed to it. So we will see on that. Okay, it looks like we're ready to vote on the amendment. Any last comments anyone needs to make on this? Okay, so we will move to a vote. And the amendment is to add a paragraph that says, upon completion of the master plan. Okay, I'll start over. Upon completion of the master plan by the Master Plan Steering Committee, the master plan shall be submitted to an annual town meeting for approval by a majority vote of those attending, and recommend to the Board of Selectmen that the master plan be submitted as a question for approval by a majority vote at the next town election immediately following the town meeting at which it was presented. Everyone got it? Know what we're voting on? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay.
Cards.
That's okay, that's okay. I think I know which way that went, but when in doubt, show me your cards. So, would all those in favor please raise your blue cards? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your cards. I'm sorry, what is it? Is there a problem? Okay. All those opposed? Okay. Vanessa, what do you have in the cafeteria?
We have 9 opposed, 2 yes.
Okay, and based on what I see in this room, the vote fails to obtain a majority, and I so declare. So we are now back to the main motion. There were a couple of people who wanted to speak to it. Do you still wish to be recognized, or are we ready to move on to a vote? Yes, sir. At microphone 4. Could you wait a second until we get the microphone turned on? Okay, please proceed.
Should I repeat?
Yes, please.
Bob Hilton, 70 Lowell Road, Carlisle, in the center, where I've had the pleasure and the pain to live for over 50 years. We've put nearly 5 acres into a conservation restriction in the center and have restored 2 of the worst tear-down houses in the village. So those are my credentials, if you will. And I had some concerns about something in this article, and also, I'm sorry to say, something in the next article, and I will try to be very brief. I would like to endorse the current article and was prepared to do so, but we received this leaflet in the mail, which gave me some concern over one aspect on a recommendation that it made. Our town center, it says, I'm quoting, our town center needs new zoning and investment to be a more attractive and walkable heart to our community. And I'm not sure what that means, and I would be interested in an answer to why we need rezoning in the center. And exactly, that's not an if, that's a given, at least in the leaflet. So I would like to hear the committee give its thinking on what rezoning they think is required. If we need more business, I think the center, if we need more business zoning, I believe the center and right around the Rotary, it's a very small district, would probably be the worst place to put it because of the congestion.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there, and I'm going to answer your question, which is whatever's in the leaflet is irrelevant. You're voting on the motion, which is to fund a master plan. The question of should any zoning be different anywhere in town is one of many questions that will be addressed by the plan. And whatever's said in the commitment, in the leaflet is not a commitment of what will happen in the master plan.
I wonder if the committee could address why that isn't at least conditional, then it is a given. Town center needs new zoning. I wonder if they could address
that was their opinion, and as the committee said, this will be our collective plan. And so, if 300 people show up and say no new zoning in the town center, then that'll be the answer. Well, so we're not here to debate the zoning. So it's their choice to put it in the leaflet, but we're not voting on zoning tonight, and there's no commitment to it either.
Well, I think that particular thing shows poor judgment, so I wondered if they would care to...
We'll give them one last shot to speak before we vote. Were there any other comments?
It's Bob
at
Clark of
microphone 3.
Robbins Drive. I move the question.
Okay, there's been a motion to call the question, and there's been a second. My usual practice is to discourage this motion. However, if I think it's prematurely cutting off debate, but we've had a lot of debate, so I will allow the motion. So there's just a quick majority vote on whether we should proceed to a vote. This isn't the vote itself, it's just should we cut off debate. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. And in the cafeteria?
All ayes.
All ayes. Okay, so the motion carries.
Sorry, one nay.
And one nay. Okay, well, the motion still carries by a majority, and I so declare. So we will now move to a vote on the main motion, which is to appropriate $160,000 to be expended by the Master Plan Steering Committee for the preparation of the master plan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
The ayes have it.
Okay, and I say the ayes have it in here as well, so the motion carries by majority, and I so declare. We now move on to Article 13, which is the Town of Carlisle Complete Streets and Crosswalk Safety Enhancements article. I recognize Mr. Escalillo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 for the purpose of supplementing the funding for the Complete Streets project and implementing crosswalk safety recommendations such as those outlined in the Stampsey and McNary engineering report titled Crosswalk Safety Enhancements, report dated November 26, 2018.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. I recognize Melinda Gambino to speak to the article.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. It's great to see everyone still here. I'm Melinda Gambino. Last year I spoke about efforts to address pedestrian safety in town center and at the crosswalks on Bedford Road. Tonight I'm pleased to bring updates about these efforts to all of you. Over the last year, the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, or TSAC, has heard input from residents at 2 public forums asking for measures to improve pedestrian safety in town. Some of the concerns included the number of pedestrian-involved crashes at the crosswalk on 142 Bedford Road, and the observation that traffic accelerating out of the rotary poses a pedestrian risk at the library crosswalk. Since the forums, several actions have been taken to address these concerns. The town of Carlisle joined the Massachusetts Complete Streets program, which was initiated by the Board of Selectmen and carried out by TSAC. The Pathways Committee engaged an engineering firm to conduct a crosswalk safety study to bring specific actionable recommendations for improving crosswalk safety on Bedford Road. And there was a speed limit reduction to 25 miles per hour in the center and along the pathways as recommended by TSAC and adopted by the Board of Selectmen. So you can see there's been a multi-committee effort to address pedestrian safety and access in town. Tonight we're here to talk about Complete Streets. Complete Streets is a statewide funding program that provides competitive grants to municipalities to implement roadway and pedestrian safety improvements. And how did Carlisle get started in the program? Carlisle engaged an engineering firm to help our town evaluate and prioritize potential Complete Streets roadway and pedestrian improvements. We formed a Complete Streets task force with representation from several town departments and committees to work with the engineers. The Traffic Safety Advisory Committee leads the effort with additional representation from several town committees. So what are the steps that got us here? First, our town adopted a Complete Streets policy, which expresses our commitment to incorporating Complete Streets principles in our planning and construction efforts wherever feasible and practical in the context of our town's unique character. Next, the committee set to work with the engineers to evaluate and prioritize areas of concern with respect to pedestrian safety and access. 25 small projects were outlined in a prioritization plan. And finally, with an accepted plan, Carlisle was eligible to apply for funding under the Complete Streets program. The program allows towns to apply for a maximum of $400,000 in a given grant cycle. Carlisle applied for the maximum funding amount to address the most critical safety and access needs, and we received a grant award of $250,000 toward the completion of the projects. So the projects are crosswalk safety improvements at 142 Bedford Road and the Banta Davis crosswalk, redesign of the town center rotary to improve traffic flow and pedestrian safety and access, and construction of the sidewalk section between East Street and Ferns. So I'll talk a little bit about each of these in turn. Part of what prompted these efforts was residents' concerns over crosswalk safety. I mentioned the traffic incident at the crossing near 142 Bedford Road. This is the first crosswalk you enter as you leave town center and head east, just past the post office. And these two slides show a couple of different instances of crashes that were captured there by the homeowner. In response to these concerns, we hired traffic engineers to review the existing conditions, and they found our signage to be inadequate. The slide shows the location. Okay, so installation of new lighted signage and advanced warning signalization is recommended to alert motorists to the presence of pedestrians at these two crosswalks. The next slide shows the location of the crosswalk circled in yellow where the signs will be installed. These are outside of the historic district on Bedford Road, as I said, at 142 Bedford Road and the entrance to the Banta Davis land. The majority of the work, however, will take place in town center. And this is a concept prepared as part of our Complete Streets application, and many of you may have seen this in the paper. It's important to note this is only a concept used as a starting point, and it's not the final design. Since we've received the grant award, we'll soon start an engineering design phase for the rotary, and there will be community input and information sessions as part of that process. So the goal of redesigning the rotary is to calm traffic entering and exiting, and to improve pedestrian safety in the center. The design process will consider such things as realignment of the approaches, narrowing the travel lane by adding a truck apron, as well as improvements to the crosswalks and ramps for ADA compliance. Again, this is only a concept, but it gives you a sense of the goal. Realigning the approaches makes it more difficult to speed up in the rotary, and the truck apron serves the purpose of narrowing the travel lane for cars while it still provides a surface for trucks and buses to use in their turning radius. And then there's the addition of the ADA ramps at the crosswalks. Lastly, the grant provides for construction of the missing sidewalk segment to connect East Street to the Ferns crosswalk. People see where that is. So, the Complete Streets Grant Award is specifically aimed at pedestrian safety and access, but as a committee, we're also aware that Town Center is the heart of Carlisle, and we will be conscientious to consider our unique character as a town and the aesthetic appearance of the work that is done, and to gather community input along the way. All in all, this is a really great opportunity for the town to complete some important pedestrian safety projects and to improve our town center. We knew during the application process that the town would have to put some funds towards completing the work, and the warrant article will supplement our grant award to complete the construction of these projects. And this slide shows some of the other funding components of the project. So we ask residents to support this work and approve the $50,000 Complete Streets warrant article to supplement our $250,000 grant and improve pedestrian safety and access in Carlisle.
Okay, thank you very much. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support this article, as did FinCom. Planning Board voted 5-1 to support Article 13. Were there any other town boards or committees that voted on this article, that have a recommendation? Okay, seeing none, the floor is open to debate. At microphone 1.
Thank you. Abby Zimmerman, Sunset Road. First of all, I just want to thank you, Melinda, and the whole committee for putting forth all of the energy and effort required to make this reality. The fact that you've gotten external funding to support this is wonderful, so thank you. I do wonder, will we be eligible to apply for future funding in future funding cycles?
Yes. So, as I said, the towns are eligible to apply once they have a prioritization plan that's accepted by the state for up to $400,000 of funding. So we did that in this round, and we will be able to, depending on how things go, of course, we hope for these projects to be successful. We'll be able to apply for future funding.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 5.
Ruben Klickstein, 51 Indian Hill. I noticed in this proposal that the crosswalk between the library and Friends, there is no funding for a crosswalk light. And also, I believe that's one of the busiest crosswalks in town. I want to know, will there be funding for that? Or will it...
Could I answer?
Will that ever happen? Will a lighted crosswalk,
so,
that particular crosswalk?
So, just to clarify the question, you're identifying a crosswalk that is not funded in this proposal, and you're asking,
I'm asking,
will it be?
Yes, about crosswalk lights, flashing lights.
Okay, please answer.
So the lighted signalized signage is planned for 142 Bedford Road and Banta Davis Land. There is no lighted signage planned for the Rotary. And we were, as a committee, before we got this grant award, we were talking about how we could improve safety at that specific crosswalk. But now that we have this award, it allows us to look at a much larger pedestrian safety project in Town Center, encompassing all of the crosswalks that surround the Rotary. So through the design process, we hope to improve the safety of all of the crosswalks, that one included.
Because it's really needed at that crosswalk, particularly in the morning when there's no crossing guard, and there is, I don't know, 10 to 12 kids in the center of town who have to come across, and I've had complaints. I'm a crossing guard.
Right.
So they've complained to me that in the morning it's very difficult to cross. At least in the afternoons, there's 3 of us who share the duties of the crosswalk. But it's really needed badly to have a lighted. So at other times when there's no crossing guard or whatever, the little kids can get across without.
Okay.
That's one of the primary objectives.
Thank you. At microphone 4, please.
Ann Marks, 439 Bedford Road. I just have a question about the Rotary concept. I don't see anything in regards to the bicycle traffic that we have in the center and a lot on 225, and I was hoping that that was in the considerations.
You can address that, please.
So Complete Streets seeks to address safety for all modes and users, and that includes vehicular traffic, cyclists, and pedestrians. So this is something that's considered in Complete Streets projects. For our town, we have had difficulty accommodating widening of the road that would be required to accommodate 3 modes of traffic, so to speak. So given those constraints, we're not able to widen the road to include a bike lane. But yeah, it is noted as a concern.
Thank you. At microphone 2, please.
Hi, is this on? Oh.
Yes,
Hi.
please identify.
Drew Kissinger, 41 Curve Street. I just want to say I was run over by a car in Carlisle Center and grievously injured many years ago, and thank you for your efforts. It's gotten way better. It's way safer in town now due to all the trails work and the crosswalks, and anything you can do to make it safer is well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hedden.
I'll just lean over.
We'll have to see if we can find a better microphone
introduce myself
stand.
again, or?
Yes. Please.
Again, Henry Hedden, 98 East Ryan Drive. I just wanted to ask if you have an estimate for how long this project will take.
Yeah, please answer.
So we expect the design process to get underway pretty soon, and that, coupled with the permitting, should take a few months. Construction is under discussion with the DPW and the the chief of police about when is the best time, because it's in the center of town, so we'll need to be redirecting traffic. So ideally, construction would take place in the summer months, and if our timeline doesn't permit us to get through the design process and the permitting in time to do that this summer, we'll be taking that on, next year.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 4, and in the meantime, Mr. Byrne, work on that microphone stand for yourself. Make it comfortable for you. At microphone 4, please.
Diane Powers, 140 Carlisle Pines Drive. What are the consequences of not voting this $50,000 article? In other words, this is a $50,000 extra. And my question is, what will you have to give up if you don't get this $50,000?
Could you please answer?
Thank you for the question. We obviously hope that doesn't happen. When we applied for the grant, it was understood that the town would be putting some funds toward the construction of the 3 projects. If we didn't have the full amount of funding, then I believe it might jeopardize potentially some of the quality of what we might be able to do there. And certainly, I think the state has certain sort of minimum requirements for safety with respect to ADA ramps and things like that. So we'd want to be able to accomplish everything that we said that we would. That funding will help us do that. And I think it would put us, in a difficult position if we didn't have it, and it might also make it harder for us to apply in the future for future funding.
So would you have to prioritize your projects?
Obviously, we'd have to figure out what gets left out.
Okay.
But you would still get the $250,000 from the state?
Yes, we would. Well, yes. Yes, we would.
Thank you.
Okay, at microphone 1.
Peter Byrne, 223 Partridge Lane. This is by no means an argument against pedestrian safety, but has there been some consideration of traffic flow, particularly coming into town in the evenings? And also there was changes to the corner in East Street, and I wasn't sure you mentioned that at all.
Okay,
Please
so yes, you're referring to. Yes. Right. Okay, yeah, that was in the original concept. The engineers created a little bit more dramatic turning radius there, and that will not be constructed. What's planned here is just a slight change to maintain the 2 turning lanes that we have now there, and a slight change to accommodate the sidewalk there. So that would not be. And that was your second question. And your first question was related to traffic flow in the Rotary in the evening. Is that?
Any time of day, but in particular, sometimes the traffic is backed up almost to Bates coming into town.
I'm not sure how the project would address that, but if we need a more specific answer, I could defer to the police chief to talk about traffic.
As long as it's...
If you're asking about controlling traffic coming into Carlisle, I don't think I want that answer to.
I was curious about the term calming.
We're having a hard time hearing in the cafeteria.
Okay.
If you could speak into the mic, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
So your question was about what it means to calm traffic?
I don't want to go down the line of calming traffic, but it's more, I'd like to expedite traffic flow as well as ensure pedestrian safety.
Okay, thank you. We won't take a response to that. We'll just take it as a comment. At microphone 2, please.
Lisa Davis-Lewis, 327 Autumn Lane. I support the project, and it's great, that we got the grant from the state, but I do have a question on the finances. I'm pretty familiar with prioritization plans, and they're really very conceptual. So at this point, because the project hasn't gone into design, I really question where the numbers are coming from and whether they mean anything. So I suspect that next year at town meeting, we'll be back asking for more money because we really don't know. So I wonder whether it would not make more sense to move into the design phase than bid the project and really understand what we're talking about for cost before we ask for the funds.
Okay, at microphone 5, please.
Hi, Jody Perry, 103 Heald Road. So I had a question. What made us choose those particular crosswalks for the lights? Is it because it's the busiest crosswalks in town?
You can answer that.
Okay. So these were the areas of concern that were raised in the public forum. Residents had concerns over the crashes that have happened at, in front of 142 Bedford Road. And we've also seen an increase in the traffic volume and the speeds on 225. So when the traffic crosswalk safety engineers came to look at, we specified those crosswalks, 3 crosswalks on Bedford Road, and included the Library to Ferns crosswalk. And the intention was to use the findings from those, from that engineering report as a template to apply to other crosswalks in case of future pathways expansion. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It looks like I don't see anyone else asking to be recognized, so I think we're ready for a vote. Okay, we're on Article 13, and this is $50,000 for the complete streets and crosswalk safety enhancements. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
The ayes have it.
Okay, and we also have the ayes have it here, so the motion passes by a majority, and I so declare. We are now on to capital equipment, Article 14. I recognize Mr. Triola.
I move Article 14 as printed in the motions booklet.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Did we hear a second? Okay, we heard a second. Okay. Mr. Triola?
I'm just going to give some brief context to this article for those who may not be familiar with long-term capital requirements. The Long-Term Capital Requirements Committee is a separate 7-member committee, separate from the Finance Committee, that meets during the budgeting process to evaluate capital requests made by the various town departments. 2 key differences I wanted to highlight in capital items compared to the operating budget are: 1, the operating budget defines the top-line town department budgets, which are then managed by the department heads, whereas for capital items, the approved amounts can only be spent on the specific items specified in the article. Furthermore, the amount spent on that item cannot exceed the amount approved. Second, the approved amounts do not have to be spent within the upcoming fiscal year. Capital items funds may be used within 3 years. This allows more timing flexibility, which may be needed for the purchase and payment of these items. For example, if you purchase a new vehicle, like an emergency vehicle, first you have to appropriate the funds to be able to put in the order. Then you may need to make a deposit. The final payment may be made when you get the vehicle, which may take 6 months, 8 months, a year plus. So in many cases, you may need to tap the funds not during the next fiscal year, but in the year after. If funds aren't spent on that item, they are ultimately returned back to the town. Article 14 lists out the various items and amounts that the Long-Term Capital Requirements Committee recommends for fiscal year 20. I won't go through each item specifically, but I'm happy to take comments and questions.
Thank you. So the recommendation we had, the selectmen voted 4-1 to support Article 14, and the Finance Committee voted unanimously to support Article 14. Any other town boards and committees have recommendations? Okay. Any debate? Any questions? Okay. Seems like we can proceed right to a vote. So this would be an approval for all the items listed in the table on Article 14 with a total of $372,413. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
The ayes have it.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. We're on to Article 15, Municipal Facilities. This proposes a series of recommendations for maintenance, upgrade, repair, so forth to various municipal facilities. I recognize Mr. Lerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move the preamble to Article 15 up to the words Motion 1 as... Sorry. I move the preamble to warrant Article number 15 up to the words Motion 1 as written in the motion booklet.
Thank you. And is there a second? Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded, and let me just, before Mr. Lerman speaks, let me just explain here that sometimes it makes sense for one reason or another to break up the vote on a particular article if they're discrete items. And in this case, there was a request that the items be categorized so that 3 separate votes could be taken. And so that's why Mr. Lerman has moved the preamble and then first motion 1. So actually the full motion will be in play here, but we're going to take it one at a time. So Mr. Lerman, would you speak?
Okay, I move Motion 1. I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $1,610 for item A, domestic hot water mixing valves, and borrow the sum of $57,500 for item B, remove underground fuel tank.
Okay, and we had a second for that?
Second.
Okay. So, you have 8 minutes.
Okay, I'll take less.
Good.
First of all, in the motion booklet, the dollar amounts associated with each of the items, A, B, C, and D, are different than in the motion because the contingency fee is built into the dollar amount in the motion that I just moved. The domestic hot water mixing valve is for the police station. Right now, the police station requires frequent attention by plumbers because the hot water is often scaldingly hot. This thermostatically controlled hot water mixing valve will address that problem. Removal of the underground fuel tank is for the generator at the fire station. Currently underground storage tanks for fuel are not legal in Massachusetts, and we're required to remove it. This $50,000 will cover the cost of removing it and replacing it with an above-ground tank with a possible buffer for any remediation that might be required.
Okay, you finished on that one?
Yes.
Okay, so just want to make sure everyone understood. The motion here has the amounts $1,610 for item A, $57,500 for item B, and Mr. Lerman has explained that the apparent, not a real discrepancy between that and what you see on the following page, where the estimated costs were at $1,400 and $50,000 respectively. The numbers in the motion just include the 15% contingency that otherwise is in line item F at the bottom of the table. Okay, so on motion 1, the selectmen voted unanimously to support that. And FinCom, what was your recommendation?
We also supported unanimously, 4-0.
Okay. Any other boards or committees have an opinion on items A or B? Okay. Any debate on that? Okay, Mr. Erickson?
David Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. I'm just kind of curious. I mean, we have hot water mixing valves in our hot water system, and they don't cost $1,400. I mean, why is it so much for what looks to me like a pretty simple valve?
Mr. Lerman?
That's the quote that we got from a plumber and supplier. It's a thermostatically controlled valve. You set the temperature, and it automatically adjusts the flow of hot water and cold water to the temperature that you've set it at.
Is this a very large system or something? 'Cause like I say, we have something like that on our solar hot water system, and it's just a small valve. And that probably costs more than the tank and the valve combined. So I'm just curious, is there something special about this?
All I can tell you is that that's the quote that we got from the supplier.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this article? The motion 1, these 2 items. Okay, let's move to a vote. All those in favor? This is a vote on, again, motion 1, 1610 for the valves, $57,500 to borrow for the removal of the underground fuel tank, and that would require 2/3? Yes, so it's a borrowing article, so requires 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
All ayes.
Okay, that does achieve a 2/3 vote, and I so declare, so motion 1 passes. Motion 2, Mr. Lerman?
I move that the town borrow the sum of $138,000 for item C, new salt shed.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Do you want to speak to this one briefly?
This motion is to replace the salt shed at the DPW site where salt and sand are stored for winter use. The existing shed is deteriorating and is too small for the requirements of DPW. This quote will replace it with a new bow shed that's 50% larger. A bow shed you've probably seen alongside the highways. It has big cement blocks at the side and metal arches covered by a fabric to keep the elements off of the salt and sand.
Okay, thank you. The selectmen voted not to support this by a vote of 2 in favor and 3 opposed. FinCom vote?
FinCom voted not to support this, 5 opposed to 0 support.
Okay. Any other town boards or committees? Anyone wish to speak to this?
I think the discussion that it was not unanimous, obviously, but my thought was that it just gets down to a budget thing, and there's a lot of things that we're doing for facilities. There's a lot of projects that we have, and as we look through what we had done in long-term caps, and we looked down through this one, we thought, well, this is something that we could just put off a little bit so that we can defray the increase in this year's tax.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else wish to speak to this article? Anyone else from the selectmen or FinCom? Okay, I think we're ready for, I'm sorry, please.
Abby Zimmerman. I live on 168 Sunset Road, very close to this facility, and I object to the proposed bow shed. I think that would be really ugly and unattractive. That's already a part of town that gets a lot of trash and doesn't look so great. And I think if they're going to do anything, they should, A, spend less money. That's a crazy amount of money to put into a salt shed, and B, make it look better than cinder blocks and plastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're ready for a vote. This is $138,000, including the 15% contingency for the salt shed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay?
Nay.
And in the cafeteria?
The nays have it.
Okay, and this too was a 2/3 vote required because it's a borrowing one. It failed to achieve a 2/3 affirmative vote. The motion fails, and I so declare. Mr. Lerman, motion 3.
I move that the town borrow the sum of $195,500 for item D, DPW office trailer, and item E, new septic system.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Lerman.
Currently at the DPW site, the people that work there are located in a space that's above the area where trucks are moving in and out. The space is not handicap accessible, You get there using an old spiral stairway that I think came from the library. It's inadequate for the purposes it's used for, plus there's some issues about fumes from running vehicles in the various bays penetrating into that area. So we proposed moving people out of the DPW barn into a separate trailer that would be ADA compliant. It would be safer for the people that work there. It would have male and female restrooms and showers. That trailer would have to connect up to a septic system. The existing septic system at the DPW site is in failure, so in order to do the trailer, we have to put in a new septic system. So the 195,500 is for the actual trailer, and oh, well, let's see. Well, there's money allocated for the trailer and money allocated for replacing the septic system.
Okay, thank you. And the selectmen voted 3-2 in favor of these two items. And the FinCom recommendation?
FinCom unanimously supported this 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Any other boards or committees? Recommendations? Okay, any debate on this one? Mr. DeCock.
Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road. A trailer seems rather unattractive and temporary in nature, and I'm wondering why we're not thinking more long-term and something, nicer looking.
Mr. Lerman.
Well, you can consider it as short-term. The DPW building itself has a lot of issues and probably needs to be replaced. That's a long-term solution. The trailer is a short-term solution to get the people that work there into a better environment. When the long-term solution is put in place, which may be years into the future, that might require taking down the DPW building and putting a new building somewhere else, the septic system will need to be in place for the new building wherever it will be, and it will be sited in a way that will make that possible. And if the trailer is no longer necessary, it can be sold or reused somewhere else in town.
Okay, thank you. Any other debate on this motion? At microphone 3, please.
Hi, I'm John Lavery, 395 School Street. I'm also on the Facilities Committee. Jerry, in his discussion of the current status, omitted that the improvements that have been done inside the building have been done by the DPW staff over time. They're not to code. It's basically a fire trap. I'm not quite sure how the building commissioner in town has allowed them to occupy the space for the past 20, 25 years. A single call to OSHA shuts down that building. If one of those people choose to complain or a whistleblower comes in, I think our greatest concern was not that kind of interference, but safety. First and foremost, their offices are in there and their sleeping quarters on the second floor. There's not adequate egress for, in the case of a fire or any other emergency. And as Jerry mentioned, they run the vehicles in both the barn portion and the shop portion, and the fumes penetrate into the office spaces. If anybody has an attached garage on their house, this is essentially what's going on there. There's no vapor barriers or anything else to separate the two, and the guys are operating without nitrous oxide alarms, CO2 alarms, or carbon monoxide alarms. And it's a very dangerous situation, which we as a town have ignored for years because the DPW has not complained about it, which they should. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on motion 3? Yes, microphone 3.
Kathy McDonald, 33 Newell Farm. And I guess I'm happy to hear the additional information about that this is really a safety issue and for keeping our town employees safe and cared for, but I have a question for the Facilities Committee about when will a plan for the overall DPW site, what would it take to put that together so that things like the salt shed, things like the redoing of the actual facility and all of that, be put in place so we can be making these kind of investments with a view for how to evolve that site?
Mr. Lerman?
What it will take is a survey of the site and testing, doing some perk testing for where a septic system can be located, and that's actually underway right now. We will have a surveyed map of the site that will give us information about where a potential new building might be located. But again, that's a long-term plan. The building would have to be designed and funded and built, and in the meantime, the trailer provides a relatively immediate way of providing a safe environment for the employees of the town.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Abby Zimmerman, Sunset Road. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that this trailer could be sold. Have you considered buying a used trailer for this site since it's temporary? Couldn't that bring the price down a lot?
Mr. Lerman?
The answer is no. I mean, we looked at renting a trailer, and the rental cost over the period of time is about the same as buying it.
No, but I'm talking about buying a used trailer. Like you said, you could sell this trailer in the future. Could you buy a used trailer?
That's a possibility. We haven't looked at that.
Because if it's only for a short term, that to me would make more sense.
Let's define short term. Short term could be 5 years.
5 years, yeah. But I mean, people buy used cars and, used mobile homes, so.
Okay, I think the question has been asked and answered. It has not yet been considered. Okay, anything else on this one, or can we move to a vote? Okay. So, again, we are voting on a total of $195,500 for the DPW office trailer and new septic system to be borrowed, therefore requiring a 2/3 vote to pass. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
And in the cafeteria?
I think the nays have it.
The nays have it. And how many people do you have in the cafeteria at this point?
All right, we're having a discussion here. We think the ayes have it. I think I need to take a hand count. Is that okay,
Okay,
Mr. Moderator?
sure. Why don't you have people show their cards, and we'll do the same here.
Okay, thank you.
So, all those in favor, please lift your cards. Anyone opposed? Lift your cards, please. Okay, I think we've got well more than 2/3 here in this room. And in the cafeteria?
9 ayes.
Okay, so the motion carries by greater than 2/3, and I so declare. We're now finished with Article 16, and we can move on to Article 17. Mr.
16.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I always appreciate making a mistake because that gives you the opportunity to correct me, and I'm fine with that. I need people looking over my shoulder. Mr. Lerman, Article 16, please.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $70,000 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen for remediation related to a fuel tank removal at 80 Westford Street.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Lerman.
In December 2018, 2 underground fuel storage tanks, one for gasoline, one for diesel, were removed from the fire station. Testing of the groundwater around the tank excavation site showed traces of fuel leakage, which triggered mandatory testing of the public water supplies at Town Hall and the fire department. Town Hall's water had no detectable levels of hydrocarbons, and the fire station had a detectable level of MTBE, though at a level 100 times lower than the allowed level for drinking water, and no other detectable hydrocarbons. The MTBE could possibly be a remnant from the fuel spill at Daisy's. Even though the levels were low, the Mass Department of Environmental Protection required an IRA, an Immediate Response Action Plan. This included testing 8 private wells within 500 feet of the fire station and also drilling monitor wells in the vicinity of the excavated tanks. A licensed site professional was hired by Carlisle to file the IRA, perform the water testing services, and file reports with the state. Their estimate of the cost for this service ranges from $20,000 if testing shows little or no contamination to $70,000 if testing shows detectable traces of contamination. Our hope and expectation is that the costs will be toward the low end, but to be prudent, we're asking for funding at the higher amount in case more testing or remediation is needed.
Thank you. We had the Board of Selectmen voting unanimously to support, as did the FinCom. Did any other boards or committees have a recommendation on this? Seeing none, we'll see if there are any questions or debate on this. Yes, sir.
Bob Supnick, Heald Road. Jerry, the underground fuel tank mentioned in the previous article is where, if it's not the one at the fire stations?
There are 3 underground tanks.
Thank you.
The one in the previous article was fuel for the emergency power generator that's separate, and it's still there.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I think we are ready for a vote. This one is a majority vote, $70,000 for the fuel spill remediation. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
All ayes.
So the motion carries, was that unanimous? Do we have any nays? I think it carries unanimously, and I so declare. Article 17 is a proposal for renovation project at the police station to allocate $864,742, and this is also a Prop 2.5 override. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $864,742 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen to design, construct, remodel, rehabilitate, and/or modernize the Carlisle Police Station, provided, however, that this appropriation shall be contingent upon passage of Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion referendum under Mass General Law, Chapter 59, subsection 21C, paren K, to exempt the amounts required for the payment of interest and principal on said borrowing, any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes may be applied to the payment of cost approved by this vote in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs. Sorry, ran out of energy. By a like amount.
That'll teach you not to move the motion as printed in the motion
Yes,
handout.
it
will. Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Lerman?
This is my last one, honest. In 2016, the Board of Selectmen commissioned TBA architects to perform an assessment of 4 town buildings, including the police station, to determine what maintenance was needed to put the buildings in good repair and what changes were needed for the buildings to meet the requirements of their occupants and perform up to current standards. In addition to the deferred maintenance, several problems were identified at the police station, which was built in 1987 and is a 32-year-old building. Number one, there's no public access to meeting rooms, interview rooms, or bathrooms outside of the secure perimeter, so visitors must be accompanied by a uniformed officer to use those facilities. Number two, the method for bringing people in police custody into the building, called a sally port, puts the safety of police officers and those in custody at risk. The architect's initial estimate for rectifying these problems was about $3.5 million. At last year's town meeting, we approved a warrant article that included $82,000 to engage an architect to perform a feasibility study for renovations to correct the police station's deficiencies. By limiting the renovation to stay within the existing building envelope as much as possible, we've come up with a plan that will cost $864,000, as in this warrant article, substantially less than the $3.5 million. To explain the necessity for these renovations from the perspective of the police department, I'd like to turn things over to Carlisle's police chief, John Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Lerman. Good evening, all. In brief, the timeline, obviously in 2017, the report talked about the more expensive plan with the design that you folks funded last year, $82,000, and the significant work of the facilities committee. We got down to what we can do to keep this facility safe and workable, and that's the 864 number with contingency. But why do it in the first place? Why do we need this? Most importantly, to comply with rules for what we already do, and then very significantly for the safety of the officers, suspects, victims, witnesses. It's important that we have accessibility. Part of the original plan talked about access to all 3 floors. The new plan puts all the critical things that the citizens of Carlisle have come to expect from the police department on 1 floor, and then the building commissioner allowed us to use the current lift as our handicap accessibility. So the room where we do the firearms classes, where you get permitting, where you use the bathroom, anything that the public would need access to was brought there. That was part of the savings. And most importantly, to make this building right for the customer. The safety piece is pretty clear. The 2017 report talked about our inability to house prisoners correctly, and importantly, be booking them correctly. Behind me is a picture of what booking looks like currently, which involves seating someone in a chair, and the officer sitting next to them and putting their information in the computer. Clearly, when the building was built, this was all done by hand, a piece of paper, over a desk, and with significantly less numbers than we work with now. Obviously, the chair with the handcuff ring on is not used anymore, but that's what was done, and that is what's still there. The talk about the Sally Port really involves both storage as well as properly bringing prisoners into the building. That's what the picture of the garage looks like now. Anybody that comes by there and the doors are open, that's what you see. So the problem with that is that's all the storage stuff too. That's our extra generator, that's flares, it's handgun cleaning, it's everything. And in brief, we're not allowed to do that when we're bringing people into the building. And the solutions to this, I'll talk about in a second. The last piece is the public access piece. And part of the plan involves doing more than just having the one door that most of you know, that's the locked door going into the police station. So anybody who's brought in for any reason, a witness, a person just needs to talk to somebody, has to be brought into a secure area, and that's not really the right way to do it. And also some of the offices that people need to go to do normal business that we're charged with doing are on that upstairs. We call it the 3rd floor, but the 2nd floor from ground. That stuff's all going to be brought down to the ground floor by realigning the design. The last piece is proper evidence storage for large evidence. Currently, that's in the gray shed that was built way back when we were doing MBTE remediation prior to my time, more than 15 years ago. That's the building that housed the motor that did the water circulation. That's where the long-term storage is for large evidence. It's packed, and it's not the right way to do it. It's a padlock with a camera aimed at it. And the shed's about to fall down in itself. So, in brief, this was the floor plan. This is the ground, this is the 10,000-foot view of what the property will look like. In blue in the back, you can probably see where the new garage would be. And the blue square that comes off the police department building is the Sally Port. So that'll be a dedicated area to bring folks in and out of the police department. The last blue thing that you'll see in the front is an emergency exit that we do not have. And that's just basically cutting a hole in the side of the building and giving people an emergency exit. So the basement will look like this. Blue areas are areas that were touched as a result of this construction. The Sally Port, the booking area will become compliant. So there's a secure area for the person being booked and importantly, is a secure area for the officer doing the booking so that the person can't get access to them. It also takes care of access control. They'd have to go through 2 locked doors to get outside. Right now, if someone felt compelled to overpower an officer and run out, they would just be going out one door that's not secured. The rest of the ground floor is untouched. On the main floor, you can see that we reconfigured, for those of you who've been in there, a couple of the offices. We're putting the classroom on the ground floor, putting a handicap accessible bathroom right inside the door, which will also leave us a small area to talk to witnesses and people that need to be spoken to, like young people, like C4RJ, for those of you who are familiar with that ability of our town. And of course, it throws in the new emergency exit. Second floor remains largely unchanged. All we're going to do is put a wall up between what is now the classroom and an office. The new garage that's out back will be out back. It has a workroom in it, so all the stuff, the firearms cleaning, anything that needs to be handled, worked, all of our windshield washer fluid, anything that takes care of cruiser maintenance will go in the workroom. Evidence storage, self-explanatory, that's going to be a locked area. The cruiser is to keep one car warm there, one car warm in the Sally Port to alleviate idling the vehicles in the winter when they're at the station. Storage is storage for things like cones, signage, things that you saw in the garage that have to get out of there. The last piece is our motorcycle, our ATV, and the mountain bike, and they'll go in the front of that. And thank you very much for considering this request. I know this is not easy, but it will make us much safer, bring us into rules compliant, and I think be much more customer friendly at a very reasonable cost. You should give a lot of credit to the folks on the Municipal Facilities Committee for working with a very, very sharp pencil. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the selectmen voted 4-1 not to support, so 1 in favor, 4 against.
To support.
I'm sorry, 2 and 3? A different vote? Okay.
We voted 4-1 to support Article 17.
Yeah, we took a vote.
Yes, we did.
We took a revote.
You had a revote? Yes. Okay, so it's now 4-1 in favor, okay. So different from what is written in your motion book. They voted earlier this evening after this was printed. FinCom, your vote?
FinCom voted not to support it, 1 in support, 3 in not support, and 2 abstaining.
Okay, any other boards or committees? Okay, let's have some discussion about this. Mr. Friedman.
David Friedman, Hutchins Road.
Can we have the microphone?
David Friedman, Hutchins Road. I support this article. This is not a wish list or a Cadillac upgrade. It has been assiduously whittled down by the Municipal Facilities Committee to what I trust are the essentials. There's been a suggestion that we should wait to address these essentials till after the master plan process is complete. I don't buy this argument, not because I don't think the master plan may provide some guidance on the possibility, for example, of a future combined public safety building. Rather, I think it will be clear that we don't and won't need a combined facility, and I expect there will be other needs that will be higher priorities. And so it will be, in my opinion, reasonable for the master plan process to identify a new combined $12 to $15 million public safety building as a priority in the 10 to 15 year time frame. Let's be realistic about timing. A couple years for master planning, some time for debate about a decision to proceed on the $12 to $15 million expense, time to budget for design and planning, then the designing and planning, perhaps the need to acquire land, and then actual construction, easily 7+ years. Having already kicked this can down the road for 5 years, and thanks to Chief Fisher and his department and the Municipal Facilities Committee having polished the can during this time, I don't think it makes sense to kick it down the road for another year or two. And remember, FinCom pointed out in their presentation that they do not expect budget pressures to decrease. So if we're going to do it, now's the time to do it.
Okay, at microphone 4.
Sherwin Ayati, Autumn Lane. Thank you, Chief, and really appreciated the open house and the officers giving the good tour and explaining everything. I do have a question, though. I do support it, but I do have a question because, the explanation and the tour was really great. There's a lot of things that has to happen, and as you said, compliance is a key thing. Is there a way the cost could be managed differently? The construction, the additional structures. There's the issue of parking. There's a lot of other things. Is there a way things can be planned differently or extended in time in terms of a budget cycle?
So you might remember when we talked about the parking plan, changing any parking was cut out. All right, that was a different expense item. That was actually cut out a couple of months ago. So the parking plan won't change. Parking might be slightly reduced, but we're going to have to work with it. As far as doing things incrementally, this will be a very difficult job to do incrementally because as soon as we take the back wall out, as soon as we talk about doing the sally port and fixing the booking, as soon as we have that all open, it seems it just would not work. Because one of the other things we look for, without getting too far in the weeds, municipal facilities, is us moving out of the building and doing renovations with us out. But it's more cost efficient for us just to work around them. But when we're doing it, kind of do it all at one time. They're talking about doing it on different floors, and we'll move around the floors. But keeping in mind, we're the only 24/7 building in town, and it's extremely important that our citizens, our customers, be able to get in there and do the business they need to do efficiently. But thank you for bringing up both those questions.
Thank you. Any other comments or debate? Ms. Zimmerman.
Hi, this is my most vocal town meeting. I'm just wondering if you have looked into any ADA improvement grants that are available through the Massachusetts Office on Disability to help fund this project?
That's a really good question. We probably will take a look at that, but we're mostly looking at being ADA compliant. We were really focused on that piece. If there's money to help us with that, I am all for it. And I'll probably ask our friends in the design world that have those contacts to do that. But it was really, really important to us to be ADA compliant with this plan, and this was the least expensive way to become ADA compliant. Thank you.
Also, another question. Have you applied for any variance on the ADA compliancy at any point in this planning process?
So we didn't need to when the building commissioner allowed the current lift that's there to work, and when we moved all things that were required for citizens to be able to do there, to be done on that floor, that kept us ADA compliant, and especially with the one cell that we're adding in the booking area, is women and ADA compliance. We're leaving the other cells like they are, but right now we're not compliant with the ADA, and this will bring us into ADA compliance with the cell area, and then the bathroom, because it's the new bathroom that's going to be in there, will be ADA compliant. Does that answer your question?
No, I was just asking, you can apply for a variance and then you have to get an extension year after year if you aren't meeting the ADA compliancy rules. And I was asking if you had ever applied for that so that you could figure this out more. But
Try
that's
to do
fine.
it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Sorry. Please.
Tom Smith, 195 Stern Street. I was the dissenting voice on FinCom. I voted for this. Obviously, I'm speaking as a private citizen. And I'll tell you why. I believe in the planning process, but to echo the comments from before.
Could you please move closer to the microphone?
So I believe in the planning process, but to echo previous comments, I think it'll be years before the planning process actually solves this problem. Meanwhile, the problems continue, both on the negative side as well as the positive. The chief emphasize some of the negative issues, ADA compliance, safety for civilians in the police force, inefficiencies in the process, et cetera. I believe you also mentioned, we talked before, there are some efficiencies you could get in terms of collaborating with other police departments in the area, sharing forces and so forth, that you can't really do now. You can't really fully leverage the cooperative effort among police departments. And I would think that given the fact that the reality is we're going to have probably 6-7 years before this thing gets solved through the planning process, with short money to spend the money now to avoid things like the problems we may have, lawsuits, God forbid, et cetera. So I strongly recommend voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 2.
Hi, Ann Davidson at 46 Lowell Street. My question is a specific one. I'd like to know what our projected lifespan is on the building, either with or without the proposed renovations and addition. The building, I think you stated, was built in 1987, so we're 32 years in with this building, correct? So can you tell us what the lifespan would be if you didn't do any of these renovations? I understand it's not compliant, but I'm talking about like the actual envelope of the building, the mechanicals, the plumbing, things like that. And then what is the expected lifespan post the $865,000 investment?
Could you please address that?
Well, the architects tell us that the building should last for at least 10 more years. Now, there will be, the various systems, heating, plumbing, will need maintenance along the way, but the actual building structure should be good for at least 10 years.
And is that with or without the renovations?
It's probably without the renovations, but the building won't be functionally useful for 10 years without the renovations.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, it's an $865,000 renovation, and the building will then be useful for 10 more years?
That's what the architects are saying. Now,
Okay.
Will it last longer than that? Yeah, sure, probably.
Okay.
Will we want to still be using it in 10 years? That's something that the master plan will probably address. But in the meantime, we'll have a building that will be functional for what it's supposed to be, namely a police station.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Erickson.
David Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. So I was here when we voted to build the police station in the first place. And I'm wondering why these weren't viewed as problems when we first designed the police station.
Well, you probably remember from that time period, because I was a police officer back then too, and I had more hair. But keep in mind that we've moved from storing information in paper to electronics. That also our town has exceeded the 5,000 resident limit, which creates a whole different group of requirements that we had to do, and back then it was not. When this was built, we had very few arrests, we had very few police officers, we had not a big traffic problem. If you look at the traffic studies from the time period you're talking about and look at what we do now, it's not even close. So, our job has changed, but we also know a few things about doing our job better now, about how to keep people safer, about how to handle people that are having their worst possible day. We always see people on their worst possible day, and it's incredibly important that we treat them with respect. And I gotta say, when I came on the job, it was a hair different. And I think we've changed for the better. I think this building has served us well. And I think we will get 10 plus years out of it. You paid for a new roof a couple years ago. You've paid for the evidence system to get upgraded. And we've done things right, and I think this will help finish that piece to get us to that 10 years before we have to take a look at it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Add microphone 2.
Carolyn Liang of 130 Ember Lane. In terms of the bathroom design, did the committee look into maybe doing like a porta potty? I don't know if a porta potty would be cheaper than redesigning a whole bathroom.
I'm not sure that we could find an ADA compliant porta potty.
Just a thought.
Okay, at microphone 4, please.
Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road. I note that $864,742 is a rather large number. It's almost exactly the value of my house. I note that this is a Proposition 2.5 override, and I'm wondering if you can explain to the voters the actual increase to our tax bills on average if we pass this.
Do you have that number, or does our treasurer or someone from FinCom, is there anyone able to? Please.
Bonnie Fleck, Treasurer Collector. The average increase to a home valued at about $823,000 is about $67 a year.
Thank you for that. Any further comments or questions at microphone 2?
I'm Deborah Kablotsky. I live at 55 Lowell Street. I'm an abutter to the police station, and I have huge respect. I understand completely some of the needs that need to be made. And I just wonder, I live in a very small footprint next door, so do you. And we have historic burial grounds next door. We have streams, wetlands in the background, and it feels like you're putting a lot of stuff in a very small place. And I'm concerned about that and what that will look like for the lands, the landscape of the center. And my second question is, this is a massive renovation, how are you going to continue to serve the community under these kind of massive renovations?
Okay, you don't have to answer the first question. It was an expression of a concern. Second question about how you will handle the transition, or actually during the construction, I think is an important one.
So excellent question. And when we're talking with the architects, we started talking early about what we would do first to ensure that we can stay on budget and keep business as usual going 24/7. That's going to really be a major part of this, to ensure that people can safely get in and out of the police department, so that our police officers are safe during this. It's going to take some planning, it's going to take some thought, but we have a high level of confidence we can get that piece done. And you probably know, part of this design is we've already kind of lowered the roof line of the garage to really ensure that not much can be seen from folks driving by. Obviously, your property's right next to us. You're a perfect neighbor, thank you. But you unfortunately will be able to see the garage, and there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But thank you for bringing up those questions. I hope I answered everything.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Okay, I think
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Hello. Since I'm the only, Kerry Kissinger, since I'm the only dissenting vote in the selectmen, I think I should I owe John the courtesy of explaining why I voted that way. First of all, I think the building structurally is sound. It's not a structural issue we're dealing with. It's the issues of workarounds, things that the state requires us to comply with but never funds us to comply with those rules. And we've been working around those kinds of issues for quite a while, and we'll continue to do that. So we're in a building that's structurally sound but requires us to do a lot of workarounds in order to be productive in that building. But this $800,000 as a mortgage, when you pay your mortgage, if you get a mortgage for $800,000, by the time it's paid, do you know you paid more than $800,000? Because there's something called interest associated with that. So we're probably going to pay for this maybe 1.5 or 2 times over the time frame that we're making this investment. But my primary concern is that given all else that we're trying to accomplish, and a lot of people have made comments about the master plan. They apparently know what the outcome is going to be far better than I do at this point. But I think that this is not about the health and safety of the town. This doesn't really make a difference in the health and safety of the town, which is the primary role of the police department. It may make their lives in the building safer, more convenient, less workarounds, but in terms of this magnitude of investment at this time, when we're trying to plan for what we're going to be doing over the next 5 years, seems to me we can wait a little bit on this investment. That's how I view it.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. Any further comments? Yes, sir.
Claudio Rebbi, 52 Indian Hill Road. If I understand, there is also a matter of safety. And I believe that the moment in which hoping never happens, one officer is hurt, or worse, because we don't have the appropriate safety position, we would regret not having spent those $800,000. That's all.
No applause? Enough? At microphone 2, please.
Hi, John Lavery, again, 395 School Street. I just wanted to touch on the cost and duration, kind of the time value of money thing. Since we started looking at this in 2016, construction costs for municipal buildings of this type have gone up about 40%. So just by standing still for the past 2.5 years, that's how much the price has increased. The economy, construction economy in particular right now, is booming. And I don't know is TBA here. I think they're estimating 15% a year increases in construction costs for the next 2 or 3 years. Delaying this is going to cost us a lot more. I'm very sympathetic to the argument that we're trying to do a lot in town, and this is a big lump, but delaying it is just going to make it a lot more expensive. We also had a question about the duration of the building. This is a wooden frame structure on a concrete and concrete block foundation. It will last indefinitely, 50 to 100 years if you maintain it. The finishes, particularly the exterior finishes, the roof, the siding, the windows, they will have to be replaced over time, but the building is sound, as Carrie pointed out, and will last tens of years beyond our anticipated use. Our specific plan, our request to TBA was, how long is this going to last? How long can you foresee both state and federal requirements for police buildings in towns this size, and anticipate how long the systems in this building will last? The longest they would commit to verbally was 10 years, but they're like, this is easily going to be around a lot longer than that. You'll have to pay to maintain it. If the town decides that 2 single-use facilities, the fire department and the police station, as they are, is the right way to go in the master planning process, we could be there 30 or 40 years from now, perhaps with some more modification in time, but this $800,000 could easily benefit us for decades to come. Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I think we're ready for a vote. Okay. And this, as a Prop 2.5 override, this will require 2/3, so I'm not even going to bother with a voice vote. I'll first do a quick show. We may have to go to a hand count, but let's see. First, all those in favor, pull out your blue cards. Okay, and thank you very much. Actually, I'm sorry, can I get the... All right, thank you. And all those opposed, raise the cards. This is close. I think I'd like to ask for a hand count. Could we have the tellers, please? Okay, so anyone who is not a teller should be sitting down. Otherwise, you won't be counted. And what I'll ask is, when I ask you to vote, hold up your card and keep it held up until you have 2 tellers assigned to your section. If they go like this, then that means you're okay to put your hands down, but not until they do that. So all those in favor, please raise your cards. You don't have to be totally silent. You can chat a little bit. Are we done in the center section? Okay, great, thank you. We ready to go to the no vote now? Okay, all those opposed, please raise your placard, your cards.
Could you just make sure that the stage got counted? Get the impression that we got counted.
No, you don't get any of my chocolate. I'm a naysayer, you're not getting my chocolate. Wait a minute, our chocolate, even though everybody else is taking the Mr. Goodbars.
Hey, that's Nathan's chocolate.
You want the bowl back?
I'm a real chocoholic.
So much.
Every week.
Because you are. I can explain more afterwards. I'm sorry?
Sorry?
2 opposed and 3.
2 opposed and 3 for.
2 opposed and 3 for. I don't think we're counted either way, but 3 for.
3 for.
Pocket.
Are those cinnamon? Yeah, those are good.
Spicy cinnamon.
I like those too. Red Hots? No. I have gut.
So do I.
Gut.
That's why I'm choosing to see these as
As your
weight
nourishment.
reducing.
There you go, okay.
These are anti-calorie.
All right, there you go.
Just like anything you eat when you're on vacation.
Oh, yeah.
It's anti-calorie.
Right, well, and if you eat it off of somebody else's plate, that's also not, that's their calories. Yeah.
All right. Gotta go away again. I'm creating quite a pile.
That's okay. I won't tell. The only reason I got these is because I had leftovers. Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's good too.
No, we're halfway through. We didn't get this. Yeah, if it goes quick.
Yeah. We're only halfway through, but hopefully we'll get it.
We're supposed to start at 10, right?
Really points out why we had such a hard time with this.
Yeah. And Luke voted both ways tonight, so. I mean, I know I was in a pretzel twist over this because we know that it's hard for
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
percentage going up, you know? I know that, but on the other hand, I also know we really need this building to get fixed, and we need to stick to our guns for the facilities. To maintain them.
$2,000 in taxes. You're gonna have it sitting on the counter, you can just drive by.
We're driving people out of
Put it
town.
on my tab.
We're not doing our jobs.
Well,
There you go.
the only place to cut, honestly, is in this. We don't have it. The staff. I'll tell you, we need. Well, it'd be nice to get finished with this one tonight.
I think we just, the one that we didn't think was even gonna move.
Oh, he's not gonna. It's past 10 o'clock. 10:30.
The teachers have to.
Need a pen? Oh.
Dear friends.
In there.
See the pile of paper the little guy has up next to us?
Yeah.
It's in the aisle.
Yeah.
Great teachers.
Only has 8 minutes.
Get up and
Do you think this is a stupid point to make?
I don't think it's a stupid point. Except that, you know.
Absolutely.
I don't know what it means exactly.
A significant
Is this too many deer? You know, obviously, not every one of those is too many deer.
Right.
But we, you know, I think the point is, yes, we could have done it better. Does that really mean that it should be taken away? This isn't about giving the town a choice. And so, we did a pilot. Pilots are never perfect.
Yeah. Right. That's why you do a pilot, to learn.
Let's learn from the pilot.
The definition of an expert, I always say, is somebody's already made that mistake. So we are becoming experts. We've made our mistakes.
Right.
Improve on it. Doesn't mean that we won't make another mistake next year of some other sort. But, okay. Oh, I think the schools might have gotten an earful of that. Audience about teachers.
Yeah.
I believe so. I think so.
Yeah, let's wait, take the pulse, I mean, I wouldn't bother with this until we take the pulse of the meeting and see how they, you know. Keep this in the back pocket.
Luke is certain it's going to pass, though.
We're certain that the deer ban, the hunting ban is going to pass in public lands.
I have a feeling. Yeah. But maybe not. I've been wrong about most everything this town did. By the way, that town. I don't know.
And, you know, there will be a big audience for the marijuana. So it's not like nobody will be here.
Is the marijuana really controversial?
I'm for it.
I mean, the town.
I think a lot of people are against it. They just don't, you
But
know.
a lot of people voted to leave it.
They did, but they don't want it here. And I think
It's not going to be here.
it should be cultivated. Well, I think we voted for it. I think we're an agricultural town. We should cultivate it.
We can't. It's too much of a not in my backyard.
I agree.
Thank you for your patience. The vote is 217 in favor, 67 opposed. That exceeds a two-thirds majority, and I so declare the motion carries. We're well past 10 o'clock, so I would, in a moment, I will ask for a motion to adjourn to tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. But first, I would thank all of you for coming out tonight, and I invite you to return tomorrow night. I also invite you to invite your neighbors to be here. Get here before 7 if you can, so that we can start promptly at 7 o'clock and move through, because if we don't start promptly and move swiftly, we'll have to be back here Wednesday. So, is there a motion to adjourn to tomorrow evening at 7 p.m.?
Mr. Moderator, I move.
So moved. And second?
Okay.
All in favor, vote with your feet.